Okay. Okay. Well, I guess Mr. Castillo, are you going to be doing the roll call now?
I shall.
Okay, great.
Yeah, so I'd like to introduce Juan Castillo as your new staff liaison.
Everybody.
Thank you.
So you're saying we've been fired?
I'm still gonna be here. Probably, so.
She'll be right behind me, making sure I do everything right. Okay, so Bob Aikman,
Here, Bob.
Stephanie Sutton,
Here?
Christian Newman,
Here.
Thomas Hawkins,
Here.
James Blythe,
Here.
Jason Hurst,
Here.
Sophia Corrugetto,
Here.
and Tina Certain. Everyone's present.
Okay, great, thank you. Can I get a motion to adopt the agenda, please? Okay, a second?
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Then can I get a motion to approve the minutes of the last meeting, please? Okay, Mr. Newman, is there a second? I was trying to pull this up to make sure they were here on the back.
You might be right, I don't see minutes attached here, so you might have to approve those at the next meeting.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
It's not linked on the printout, but I just was checking if it's online, which is taking a while. Okay, so we will hold off till the next meeting and adopt 2 meetings worth of minutes at that time. Okay, with that, Mr. Castillo, can you read the announcement into the record, please?
Sure. Section 30-3.3 of the Land Development Code establishes the Plan Board, including its membership, rules of procedure and functions, powers, and duties. The Plan Board is advisory to the City Commission on most planning petitions. Appeals of Plan Board decisions concerning special use permits are to a hearing officer within 30 calendar days of the decision. See Section 30-3.58C of the Land Development Code. The procedure for an appeal is set forth in Section 30-3.58.
Thank you. Do we have anyone here to make public comment on items not on our agenda tonight? If so, please feel free to step up to the microphone at this time. If you're here to talk about an item on the agenda, we'll get to that later. Mr. Shepherd?
Yes, my name is Donald Shepard. I'm the People's Representative, and I'm running for mayor. And what I'd like to speak about is that the infrastructure bill, I think, should be passed because it's so needed. The other bill of 3.5, I don't think should be passed. As far as our country's going, and the money that they're setting aside for Afghanistan and that, I think they need to take and clean up things, each city, each country, first here in the United States before we go doing things in Afghanistan or Pakistan or other countries. We need to take and help our homeless and the poor to take and have housing so that we can move forward instead of falling backwards. And this here is something that has definitely been one of my items that I've been trying to get going for our homeless here and for the low-income people of East Gainesville.
Okay, thank you, Mr.
12 years
Shepherd.
of discretion. So we thank you very much.
Thank you. Those items are all beyond our ability, but thank you for sharing your opinions tonight. Anyone else that wishes to speak to an item not on our agenda this evening? Okay, moving on to our old business item. Mr. Castillo, can you read that into the record for us, please?
Old business item 200730, petition PB-2160 TCH, City of Gainesville, amend the Land Development Code to modify building frontage, building entrance, and building material requirements for properties in transit zones.
Okay, and I'm not sure which staff member, I don't remember who's been presenting
It's
this
me.
one. Okay.
So I have the text here that we can go through together. And so we've talked about this item a few times. Probably tonight we'll want to focus on the changes that have been made since the last meeting, last time we talked about this. But just to sort of recap, the first change here was to add language that would exempt new single-family home construction from building frontage requirements. We've been having a lot of issues with people being able to meet those requirements for one single-family home. So that's the first change here. The second sort of area of changes has to do with outdoor seating areas being counted towards the required building frontage requirements. Let's see, and then we also introduced some new language here stating that the appropriate reviewing board may consider alternative compliance proposals. So, you know, there's an option for people to sort of be creative and bring new ideas that might not be covered in the code to count towards building frontage requirements. We added some language, I believe this was in the version that you reviewed last time, but more strictly specifying what qualifies as an active ground floor use for the commercial uses in the multi-story buildings in transect zones. So active uses may include display or floor areas for retail uses, waiting areas for restaurants, atriums, lobbies, other things that you would see as an active use at the ground level. Let's see, and then probably one of the more substantive changes that we had made that we brought up last time was the requirement that ground floor tenant spaces be built out, so to speak, at the development plan stage. So we did meet with, sorry, I'm trying to zoom into a point where you could actually see it here. We met with GRU to talk about the grease trap requirements, and we met with the building department as well, just to talk about the feasibility of this requirement. So I think the difference from the last time we presented this is we added some more specific information about what items would actually need to be provided. So the provision of exhaust ventilation and grease interceptors during building construction would be required. Grease interceptor size shall be determined by GRU during the grease trap / interceptor permitting process and shall provide adequate capacity to serve all prospective ground floor tenants. So this language has been reviewed by GRU staff, in particular the department that approves grease interceptors, and they are comfortable with this language and think that they could make this work with the language in there basically saying it needs to be determined by GRU at the time of building. So we'll definitely be wanting your feedback on that. And then the other sort of big part of this text change is material requirements for new buildings. And so this is some new language that we introduced as compared to last time to try to get more specific about the type of materials, when this applies, and things like that. So we specifically wrote in that this would come into play for developments meeting the threshold of intermediate or major development plan review. So this wouldn't be something that we'd be looking at on the minor development plan. So basically less units, less residential units, and less commercial square footage. Additionally, it would only apply to buildings that are greater than 2 stories in height. The language further specifies multifamily residential projects or mixed-use projects, which include both residential and non-residential uses, shall be subject to this material classification requirement. So we took a look at some different cities, some examples of different cities and the language that they've adopted. And we really like this model that we found where it lists different classes of materials, and then further down it gives you a table that basically says you can have a certain percentage of materials from this category, certain percent, less percentage for the materials that would be in class 2 or 3. So that is something that has changed from the last time we presented this to you all. Let's see. And then we also wrote in a provision for the appropriate reviewing board may allow modifications of exterior building materials, including allowing the use of alternative materials, just so that, we want to at least provide an option for situations where people are like, well, we're not really going to quite meet this requirement, but we have another idea that might work just as well, or it looks very similar. So at least then there's an option to go to a board. It doesn't specify which board it would be, but it's kind of just more of a generic, the appropriate reviewing board. And that was mostly it that had changed from last time. The other small thing that changed was further clarifying the primary public entrances and multifamily residential units along street frontages needing to contain street-facing entrances, and being more specific about that. So those were the major changes. I don't know if Mr. Persons had anything he wanted to add on that. We've been working on this together.
So formal, Mr. Persons. Yeah, I did just, I think just to add a couple of things. I think from the last time we spoke, one of the sort of overriding themes I think that I was hearing was there was a desire from the board to write in the ability for some flexibility in terms of somebody brings a really different idea we haven't thought of, that there should be some way that they could potentially bring that to the table and offer that to the city. I think as you probably heard from me, there's a fine balance between providing flexibility and then setting some expectations, and not necessarily putting city staff in a position where we're getting sort of the bottom of the barrel, or what's the sort of path of least resistance. So we wanted to provide a process, both in terms of the frontage ideas that we talked about, about maybe public art, maybe, some sort of landscape or hardscape feature could count. I probably wouldn't feel comfortable leaving that at a staff level for approval, and so that's why you see having that going to a board. We would anticipate that it would either be the plan board or the development review board that would hear those. Same thing with materials. On the materials side, I think we heard a desire for more specificity in terms of the exterior materiality, the palette, not limiting too much. So we I think that the sort of classification of materials, and then having that expectation that the first class, the class 1, which are, for a layperson's sake, probably the most durable, highest quality materials, that percentage would go up as the building would go up. So, taller, more dense buildings are going to have higher requirement for more of the class 1. And then because building materials are constantly sort of in flux in terms of technology, we also wanted to provide a process by which somebody could substitute a material for an equivalency, provided that that would also have a board review element to it. And we wanted to provide a little bit of help for the board in determining, is this an appropriate material to substitute. So you see in the language, we included some guidance that in granting any modification, the board shall continue to agree that the proposed unlisted substitute material is substantially similar in durability and longevity to the equivalent. So we were thinking in terms of durability and longevity. So I think some of James's comments were, well, there's different sort of tiers of materials. They may be in the same sort of class. Some of the better materials are going to have a longer longevity. And so that would be something that the board could consider if somebody came and said, well, I want to use this material. It's, it's not on the list, but, here's the material specifications and the data that the board could then use to say, okay, yeah, it matches aesthetically, it matches in terms of durability, and then allow that. There is an option, and we looked at a couple, as Brittany said, we looked at a couple of different codes on materials that have been drafted relatively recently. It's sort of all over the board. Some leave it at a staff level to determine material substitutions. Some of them go to a board. My feeling, again, is since this is new, I'd rather have it go to a board as opposed to necessarily leaving it at staff. But that's sort of, I think, our approach. We also, as Brittany said, we thought it would be wise to at least initially not be sort of overly restrictive or overly apply this too broadly and start applying it to one-story commercial buildings, because I really think that at least the original intent is to address the exterior materials on some of the mid-rise and high-rise buildings that are going up right now, some of the larger buildings. So we wanted to set that. I know that the sort of threshold of what's an intermediate, what's a major plan is something that's sort of in the water at the commission level. Sort of understanding that, like if the board, wanted to be more specific in saying, setting a number of units or something along those lines, we'd be fine with that too. But anyway, that's some of the thinking behind it. We wanted to, try to button this up, provide still some options for, for some creativity and outside of the box ideas, provided, those go through a public hearing.
James, go ahead.
So first of all, just a lot of compliments. It's a really nice stride forward, and I know this is a hard one. A couple questions that I would be thinking about if I was going to go after this from an architect standpoint would be, there's minimum glazing requirements that are required at different areas of the building. And how does that glazing requirement then interact with those thresholds? So maybe just some note that would clarify, if I need to have class 1, 30% minimum. Is it 30% on top of, the glass systems or something else? Or does, for instance, if I have a huge, like 3-story mural, can that be subtracted out of that because we're spending, potentially more. The idea of a glass wall system would probably be something to define. And as you know, there's different kinds of glass. There's, stick-built storefront. There's, curtain wall. There's much more expensive, kind of systems. So maybe defining what that means, because those will carry a lot higher value and you have them in the correct category. But you may get people that are like, hey, this is a really nice window system and they're really big. Can it count, towards that, so it can dual count towards glazing and class 1. I think there's a couple things to think about that may come up as like I don't understand this requirement. And then I know you don't want to necessarily give like name brand examples of those, but as I was looking through it, most of us I think understand the difference between a fiber cement panel, lap siding. And then when you go down to class 3, there's a wood composite lap siding. Anytime you have anything that's like a very similar description, the word composite can sometimes throw people for a loop. And believe it or not, some of the wood composite lap siding is actually a lot more expensive, and it can approach the class 1 cost. So there could be some nuance too to consider, but this is such a nice framework now that I can ask those really specific questions about like trading one for the other and So again, a lot of compliments. I think it seems like it's headed in an effective way.
Cool.
And then the only note I've got on the building infrastructure is the way that it's worded. To me, it wasn't clear if the developer has to put in the physical hood exhaust equipment or if it's the pathway
Just
to
the
get to it.
Yeah.
So defining that it's the pathway versus, there was just a word in there that kind of confused me. The provision of exhaust ventilation.
Mhm.
So yeah, and the
Just to
key is the
clarify,
pathway, yeah.
I did get, and we got it sort of late, so I didn't have a chance to update it, but I did get a couple of minor clarifications, suggestions from the building official as well, that under class 2, under stucco, clarifying that we're talking about traditional hard coat cementitious stucco.
Right.
And then under class 3, adding synthetic stucco, just to make sure that, to your point,
Right.
like those things are similar and we want to make that differential.
Right.
So those seem like good adds to me too.
Great.
I will add on your first question on like how does it interact with the glazing requirements. I think in our mind or at least in my mind, I was thinking of the materials that you have, 30% of it can be this, 70% can be that. It's not like requiring a minimum percentage of materials, but it's just more regulating the area that they're proposing for building materials versus glass. Does that make sense? Is that
Yes.
kind of what you, yeah. But yeah, that's a good point. It can probably be further clarified. So I'll try to make a note of that.
Mr. Hawkins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I really like James's suggestion on the point that Brittany just mentioned about making it crystal clear how we measure this in relation to the glazing. That didn't even occur to me, but that's obviously a huge deal.
My world.
Are you imagining, Ms. McMullen, that we're gonna get this done this evening and make a recommendation to the commission, or were y'all thinking this is still another pass?
I mean, I would love to get it moved on since we've had it for so many months. What I would suggest is if you have specific suggestions, maybe make a motion to include the language that you would want. And then we can, I mean, I would love to not, have it take too much longer because there's certain parts of this, like the part about exempting single family from building frontage requirements. A lot of people have been asking about that and kind of like waiting to see what's going to happen. I mean, but of course it's up to the board. I mean, my thought would be if we could move it forward with specific motions for changes and things like that. But it's obviously up to the board.
Well, my druthers for anybody who's looking about a motion would be to move it on, and I would definitely want to include James's point about, come up with some language about how to measure that. I don't know about the materials, but if we want to motion Smith when we get there, I'd be open to that too. I had two questions or comments. One is on the question of the appropriate reviewing board. I absolutely think we need to put one in. I think that if we were to get an ordinance adopted that was that vague, it would be very chaotic for applicants and staff when it came forward. I think the easiest way to address that, and I'm interested in what any of the three of y'all think, would be to just make clear that it's a special use permit, and that way it automatically comes to us. We've got a clear framework for approving it. The problem with that is that if we get DRB review for intermediate major projects, then we're looking at two boards, and that I don't know that adds anything to the process. So what I would suggest is that when that ordinance gets back before the commission or when they have their workshop on it, maybe we're not the exclusive board that hears special use permits. If something's going to the DRB anyway, the DRB can consider the special use permit. What were y'all thinking were you thinking that after the adoption of that citizen participation rule, we would get 2 hearings for things that needed special use permits? The DRB would hear the special use permit and the underlying building permit?
I would say, I think our thinking of using this is so let's say like some percentage of site plans are going to the DRB. Ideally, like the DRB could then make that determination, like if there was a request. Occasionally, you all hear things that are related to development, like a PD, in that case, you are the appropriate reviewing board. I mean, I can tell you from my perspective, I'm fairly agnostic. If you want to specify a DRB or if you want to specify a plan board with this, I think that's why that, appropriate reviewing board is used a little bit more generically, just because some projects go to you, some projects go, or at least in the past, go to DRB.
The problem that I see with that language, though, is today there is no reviewing board. So if this becomes law before any changes to whether intermediate major projects go before the DRB, then it says appropriate reviewing board and there's no cross-reference that tells us which one it is. If we call it a special use permit, then it would just go wherever special use permits go and would automatically be updated when we updated our procedural process for sending it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I would, my recommendation, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it be called a special use permit, because then you're going to pull in all the special use permit criteria to it, and I'm not sure that those are necessarily appropriate. I would just say, like, just send it to say plan board or just say DRB, and just leave it simple like that.
So it would just be a modification, basically. I don't think we need to go as far as a special use permit, because then you get into all of that review criteria, which isn't really related necessarily to what the issue is. But yeah, I think it's a good idea to specify the board.
Okay. And then related to that, on that same page, paragraph 3, which is right there. I don't know if we can read it, it's kind of small, but if y'all look on that page at paragraph 3, under the current rule, there is an opportunity to not meet the standard, and it has to do with providing parking access. And I think we've gotten a lot of, I think that these frontage rules are some of the most important rules in our urban design standards for our transect zones. But I think the big trade-off with the transect zones, we upzoned everything dramatically. We really reduced our regulation over development, but we put in a couple of key urban design standards to make sure we got a good product, even without that heightened level of review. And we've definitely permitted stuff since then that is much higher density and doesn't meet the frontage standard and looks awful. And I snapped some photos to make the point, because I thought it would be helpful to like communicate what I was talking about. Just take 2 sheets and pass it. And I don't know, I believe that in this particular image, this is on Northwest 3rd Avenue in the Seminary Lane neighborhood. And right, it's an exceptionally suburban site plan. It's a parking lot surrounded by buildings. It doesn't meet the frontage standard. And it looks awful. And then the other 2 are gas stations that, right, they don't, there isn't a building, right? Both of these would be the secondary frontage, where I think the standards require 40% frontage, and we clearly don't, I mean, that's just not, it just doesn't even, I mean, I don't know how to describe it, except that it's not what the standard is. So I think we need more process, and so I actually wrote a suggestion out for how to change that paragraph 3 to say, if you just get a variance. If you don't want to meet the standard, you need a variance. And that would require it to go to the DRB, and then the variance standards in the code require a hardship. So there's got to be something about the site layout that makes it so you can't meet the frontage standard, and then you'd be able to build not meeting it. I would like this language, but I would also, Mr. Persons is suggesting that he just wants some board review. If it makes more sense to just say you need plan board permission. I guess my concern about saying that rather than variance is we don't know what the criteria are for exempting somebody from the rule. But I'm sort of interested in everybody's thoughts on that. And then the second thing that I wanted to ask about, again, is what's a single-family home? And I'm thinking that means building like one single-family dwelling, but I know we've got lots of instances in the code where single-family home means development on land that's designated SFR. We do define the word single-family dwelling, so if we're talking, I guess it's a question for staff, is what did y'all have in mind?
Yeah, so I would say, I think to your point, I think if we use single-family dwelling, that'd be appropriate. What we're trying to get at is instances where we have and this is mostly happening on the odd assorted infill lot where it's been zone transect and has this building frontage standard, and somebody's just building a house, a single family dwelling on that. And so it's been exceedingly difficult for the few that have come through in meeting a frontage standard, given that a lot of times they might be building on a lot that is an existing lot that's probably, it's the lot lines are established. There's not sort of an opportunity to perhaps like subdivide the lot to reduce the or to meet the building frontage. So it's just been problematic, and I think it's that's why this is in there. So I mean, I think to your point, if we want to use single-family dwelling to be more clear, that's a good suggestion.
Okay, so I would love that in our motion. And would you entertain me with this hypothetical? What if somebody brings forward a multifamily building and they say it's got 10 units in it, but they give you a drawing that shows firewalls in between the different units and say it's actually 10 single-family dwellings inside one building envelope? How do we deal with that? And how does that relate with our definition of single-family dwelling? Because I read that today in light of obviously the conversation about what's a 6-unit building, what's small-scale multifamily adjacent to historic districts, and I know we've got some small-scale multifamily that have hundreds of units in them. How do we need to change our definitions to fix that problem? I mean, clearly we do, but how do we wrangle that?
Yeah, I have to noodle on that one. You mean in terms of just dealing with this frontage or just in general?
Well, specifically since we're changing these code sections, dealing with the frontage.
Mm-hmm.
So explain that issue. I mean, as I understand it, if the building official says that there's firewalls inside a multifamily building, let's say it's 100 units, but there's firewalls between each 5 units. Let's say it's, you partition it into 20 sections of 5 units each. Then all of a sudden it's 20 buildings, that are 5 units each. Now it's small-scale multifamily instead of being large-scale multifamily. And that's how we're reviewing things in the review process. But it creates a conflict in knowing what's a single-family dwelling. Like, what's the difference between 2 single-family dwellings and a duplex? Or 4 single-family dwellings and a quadruplex?
Well, maybe this is helpful. So, like, we have a permit in. We were actually just talking about it today for a new single-family house with an attached accessory dwelling unit. So we look at it from a land development code perspective, and as well, okay, this is a single-family house with attached ADU, and we're looking at our land development code regulations for ADU as we're reviewing it. The building code it just sees it as a duplex, and so they regulate it as a duplex with a 1-hour separation. I don't know if that I would say that's probably a good sort of question offline to try to noodle out.
But, okay.
I'm not sure. I also am not sure it's like a real endemic issue right now.
I mean, I wouldn't have thought so either, but I mean, it's come up in two big development projects that were relatively controversial. Okay, I'll think on it. I mean, maybe the answer is you define a building as by the exterior building envelope. That you look at an exterior building envelope and that's your building, which is the common sense way of thinking about a building.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I have a couple of ideas about that. I think we can discuss.
So if we look at the definition of single-family dwelling, so I do like that idea, Thomas, about clarifying dwelling, because it's a single residential building consisting of one dwelling unit. And then it goes on further, but.
I wasn't thinking about this, but that creates conflict with the ADUs. I mean, do we want people to be able to build ADUs in the transect zones? I would think the answer is yes. But
They're allowed.
it's no longer a single-family dwelling.
It's still a single-family dwelling with an accessory dwelling unit.
Okay, that the code mentions accessory dwelling units. Okay.
I'm pretty sure it's defined, but yeah, and accessory dwelling units actually don't even count towards density for the way that the ordinance was adopted. So accessory dwelling units are sort of a different type of animal. But yeah. I like the thought of changing it to dwelling.
Okay, Mr. Hurst, I think you're up next.
Point number 8, is there any provision for external HVAC ducting to duct out for HVAC units?
Yes, that's the chase, I think those.
The exhaust?
Yeah, the ventilation.
Okay.
That would be built in. We did have a really good conversation, as Brittany indicated, with GRU about the grease size, or the grease interceptors. And one of the things that they highlighted, that the cost differential between if they get put in at the original project, and then the cost differential if they have to put in after the fact, is like several times greater. So, relatively speaking, I think we looked at a couple of projects, and to put in grease traps, and they in terms of, we kind of went back and forth about maybe just setting like a minimum size or number of gallons. They're sort of standard for a lot of these types of ground floor tenant spaces, about 2,500 gallons, which is like one step up from their baseline. They think they wanted to leave the language basically as being reviewed through their permit process, because they think that in some cases the size of that grease trap could be less, but they didn't want to necessarily set a larger grease interceptor sort of in code. They wanted to sort of set it at that. So I think that was a pretty overriding theme, was that just the upfront cost is so much lower to install them when the ground is open than have to come in and retrofit an existing building for a new restaurant tenant. So they were really, really glad that we were doing this, because I think it's going to help everybody.
Will multiple tenants be able to tie into that grease trap?
Potentially, yeah, and that's why we left it open as basically having capacity for it. I know right now they don't, everybody has to have their own own grease trap, but I think this is kind of some of the trying to help GRU out, and then working through that.
Yeah, my last, I guess it's just a comment. We're, from a utility standpoint, this is great. I like point number 8 a lot, because it's been a huge challenge in the leasing world, with those spaces on the ground floor retail, especially in the student housing area. But I would say this, that the trade-off is that most of these savvy investors and asset managers are going to price that into their pro forma. So it may be 6 in one hand, half a dozen in the other, because it's going to price out definitely a lot of the local mom and pops that we are used to and want to see thrive. So just wanted to put that bug in everybody's ear.
I appreciate that. I think one of the things that we've talked about with this is looking at options from like the CRA at potential like help getting the connecting mom and pops businesses into these spaces, and this is hopefully going to, like, I totally agree. I think it will be built into the pro forma, but hopefully at least lower that initial cost to bring somebody in.
Mr. Ackerman?
My comment is, in paragraph 4,
on frontage hierarchy. My question, and it seems like this constantly comes back, is I agree that we should use outdoor seating as in the frontage requirement, but I question whether we require it to be behind some kind of a fence. It seems like we're back where we're always trying to fence in outdoor seating areas for fear that someday cafes escape and we're Paris before you know it. And I understand that we probably want to define it, but it seems like that, and I guess I don't object if it's optional, but it seems like it could also be defined by hardscape or things like that would give you a more expansive public realm, rather than hemming everything in with these little fences like we have like we used to do, and still have an awful lot of them still hanging out downtown. So that would be my main thing, is that we get rid of the requirement for that 3 foot or 3 or 4 foot and replace it with an optional thing, and maybe add that it, you know, be designated by at least hardscape.
Is that all that you had?
So, yeah.
Is that all that you had?
That's all I had today.
Okay. I have a couple more things on this. I'm not crazy about excluding buildings that are 2 stories or less from the building materials if they're at the intermediate or major development plan level. I'm thinking about things like the Publix on 13th Street, the Westgate Publix project. They're pretty significant buildings that are going to be there a long time on major roads. And, you know, I think anything that's a major development plan, whether it's 1 story, 2 story, or 10 stories, should have to meet the requirements. You know, and the Publixes are a great example, but I'm sure that there's others out there. One thing I would be open to, if that's something that's coming from the commission to sort of let some of the smaller scale things go, is maybe thinking about the type of road that they're on.
I was gonna suggest
And making
that.
sure that on our like storefront streets or principal streets, we're holding them to the material standards, and you know, maybe there's more flexibility on local streets. And so rather than differentiating by the number of stories, maybe we have fewer restrictions or let this slide more on local streets. But I think on our storefront streets, we've got to hold people to the building materials. I mean, that's where we're worried about the ground floor sort of taking the most abuse because there's the most pedestrians and everything else. So I would be more interested to see something there that goes by the street type. But I think things, you know, like these Publix redevelopments have got to follow these material standards. So I would change that. I think from, you know, just strike the greater than 2 stories, and maybe, you know, allow, you know, maybe back in B, just say, or maybe under A, wherever we're talking about, let me find it, wherever we're saying intermediate or major development plan review, write an exception for projects on local streets, because I think that's where the exception should be.
I think that would be good. I mean, I would say if I mean, one option would be to just make any development along storefront streets inclusive to that list, and leave the other parts in place. I think what we were, and that's a good point about the, you know, Publixes and some of the more urban commercial development that we're seeing. Yeah, I think that would be good. If you set it at storefront street and then made it, you know, made it neutral in terms of not applying it just to mixed use or residential as this is, then we could potentially, we would pick up those commercial developments along that street frontage.
And I'm not sure, I'm trying to think of most of the streets. I mean, I think University, I think the stuff we have out by Westgate,
Most of downtown.
13th Street, most of those are storefront. I don't know if at some point it breaks to principal in some of those places, but I'm thinking like basically the DOT roads in town.
Yeah.
Main Street.
It would include some of downtown too.
Yeah,
a lot of the
include
streets
some of downtown too.
Would you say the nomenclature again? I know storefront and local are the state
There's
roads
a principal
principal.
street, and I'm not sure where a lot of the state roads are storefront in the parts that you would classify them that way. I mean, it all came through with the code.
Yeah.
And I don't know if maybe we can share like a general
I'm gonna try to
map
pull
of
one
that.
up.
Some roads, and I'm not sure exactly where it is, but I know, you know, like 13th Street at some point on Southwest 13th Street transitions from storefront to principal. And I
Yeah.
don't know exactly where that
I want to say
line
it's
is.
just north of Northwest 5th.
Yeah,
where it
so there's like
transitions.
some breaking points where like the same road will switch just because of the character of the road.
And you're thinking that it should meet the
I
material
think the material
standards on either one.
standards, I think so. The bigger roads, I think so. I think the flexibility and not having the material standards apply should only be on local streets. That's my thought, but we may need to take a closer look at that or just provide the city commission some background on what that means, because I don't know all of them are familiar with the street classification terminology.
Right, so I do have it pulled up here, and it's gonna be.
Yeah, there's also thoroughfares, but that's
A little
usually
hard to
further
see.
out and a little bit, I don't know that the thoroughfares so much in transect areas.
Right. So, so these are urban zone street types that are designated, and this specifically applies to properties that are zoned transect. So whenever you're, developing a transect zone property, there's certain frontage and setback and landscape zone and requirements and things like that. So there's 4 categories. It's storefront street, principal street, thoroughfare, and then if it's not designated, it's considered local. So if we want to look at any areas in particular, I'd be happy to zoom in. But this is sort of the main grid for where the storefront streets are. Basically, if you don't see a colored line on the street, it's a local street. So let me know if you want me to zoom in anywhere.
I think you're probably gonna be pretty inclusive if you say storefront and principal.
That's what I'm thinking looking at the map. I think storefront and principal gets most of the locations where I think this is an issue. So that would be my recommendation here, is to get rid of the building height and focus on the street type.
I don't know, 5 Points is thoroughfare?
Yeah,
34th Street by Westgate looks like it's a thoroughfare.
not by Westgate, that's,
Yeah.
the thoroughfare is,
South of the intersection?
over there.
Yeah, it is.
Oh, it's green. Unless
Well,
I'm
it
blind,
actually
which I could be
changes
blind.
right there, I think. So up until University, it's thoroughfare, and then it changes to principal for a short stretch.
Yeah.
I mean, that would affect I haven't seen the plans for the Publix, but.
I mean, for that Publix in particular, it's already in, like, they're not.
That's
gonna
already
be-
approved,
yeah.
but
Yeah.
it's just an example of, I mean, there's 1-story liner buildings on all of the surrounding streets, and then the kind of big Publix in the middle.
Yeah, I think that would be, the principal and storefront.
So I would be fine including the thoroughfare too.
So basically just exempting locals.
I think exempting the local streets. I also wonder, I like the idea of almost, rather than like having a special use permit or a variance for the building material, I almost think it should be approached more like an alternative standard. And the county has sort of alternative standard processes in their code, so it may be something just to look at. If people making the application, I think, would want to prove that whatever material they're, composite of materials that they're putting forward meet the intent of the code and are somehow maybe a better fit for whatever their use is or whatever it is. That's sort of the idea, that it's an alternative standard that meets the same intent.
Right.
I don't know especially which board that would go to. My concern is more so on the staff side. Like, do you have a staff person that you feel like would be qualified to process that, write a staff report, and present it with their opinion? Would that fall on like Sarit, or do you have someone in planning that could look at these requests?
I think so. I think as maybe this example of actually drafting this, it would probably be some sort of combination of folks in my department. It would probably, we pulled in folks from the building side, we pulled in planning, we shared this with our, I think we shared this with our new preservation planner. I think she would probably be good. She's actually in my chain of command. Sarit is also, the city architect is also, we can pull her in as well. So I think we have the staff capacity to do that. And that's how we were thinking about it too, is an alternative compliance. And that we didn't necessarily want to have it go through like a special use permit or a variance, but something where they could bring that forward. And on the materiality, we did, I think I read it, we did provide some guidance to the board in granting that modification in terms of, you know, is this equivalent material in terms of durability and aesthetic quality? So the board, whichever it is, if it's you or if it's DRB, would have some criteria to weigh that. I'll tell you on the building frontage part, we wanted to leave that pretty broad, just because there may be some crazy idea that somebody may want to bring forward. We didn't want to be too prescriptive.
So those were my main points, and then I do agree with Mr. Hawkins. I mean, I remember when these gas stations came through, kind of giving them a hard time about that, and we were told that that was considered part of the building because it was connected, and we sort of didn't have control over that. But I agree, like, we need to look at the building frontage, in cases like this, and I do think, that it should go through more of a variance process. So I agree with Mr. Hawkins on that.
Maybe a suggestion, if that's the direction, I mean, you could just recommend striking the 3 out of the code. Then you would be left with either a variance or the outdoor seating, or bringing a proposal to the board, which I think would be appropriate.
Yeah, I would support striking number 3, I think, or whatever direction others and whoever makes the motion wants to go there. Mr. Hawkins?
I'm gonna make a motion, and I think I've got everything that everybody said. Member Ackerman, let me actually, before I forget it, I took a note of the time, Ms. Hutton, when you said that you agreed with me, so and when I feel down and depressed, I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna watch that 30 seconds of this meeting.
It happens occasionally,
Occasionally, but it was just the way you said it. I felt so warm. I felt so good. Do you want to do public comment before you put a motion on the floor?
Well, do you want to go ahead and make the motion, then we can take public comment? Is that?
I'm happy to
go
do
either
whatever you
direction.
I'm gonna try to do what the city clerk does and write the motion up on the screen so that we can all.
Oh, okay, so
take
let's
a
do
look
that
at
then.
it.
Let's take the motion and
I'm
then
gonna
we'll take
write
public
it.
comment.
I'm gonna read it and then I'll bring it down to you.
Okay, that
So
sounds.
that way, because I wrote it out.
Okay.
My memory's not that good. And Mr. Ackerman, this does not address the walls at seating areas. I'm happy to add something in. I just couldn't on the fly come up with something to write down. So if you want to think about that and propose an amendment, I'd be happy to consider it. I'm a little nervous about creating a big loophole that doesn't mean anything, but I am definitely interested in what you have to, if you want to propose something there. So it has approved with 5 modifications. Number 1, insert the word glazing in paragraph 30-414.c, parent then C, parent then 2, between the words window and door. And so that would address Mr. Blythe's comment about making this measurement exclusive of glazing.
And will you make sure that I got that section right? My
30-414 CC2,
Oh,
2
okay.
C's.
Yeah, it keeps doing that. Sorry.
Number 2, I'll take Chair Sutton's recommendation, strike 30-413 B3. Number 3, replace the references to appropriate reviewing board with plan board. One reason I'm comfortable with that is I know if the city commission gets this citizen participation stuff done before or contemporaneously with this, they'll put in the board they want. Number 4, add a bullet point to 30-414 CB. It says, CB. B as in bear. Are located on a storefront street, principal street, or thoroughfare street. And I don't know if the word street needs to follow thoroughfare, but. And then 5, replace single-family home in 30-413B1. With single-family dwelling.
Can I just ask one question? Related to number 4, were you gonna strike also, as I suggested, that they have to be greater than 2 stories?
I thought,
Right now, it has to meet the threshold for intermediate or major development plan review and be greater than 2 stories.
I feel like there's a double negative here. I'm not reading this right. That was my intent. Shall be subject where these projects. We would need to insert an or. We would need to in the first bullet point, we would need to change that word to or instead of and.
Mr. Persons?
I remembered why I did think about this, and I do want to clarify before. So a subdivision is gonna fall into these categories. Like so, a single family subdivision. You can have a single family subdivision that falls under the major category if it has enough units, even if it's not multifamily. And so we're obviously, well, we're preempted from regulating exterior building materials for 1 and 2 family homes by state law now. So that just to clarify that we're not talking about that. And I think that's why I was thinking 2 stories and greater, because that would pretty much exclude most of those examples.
Well, it says right now, multifamily residential projects or mixed-use projects, which include both residential and non-residential uses, where these projects, so I don't know that a subdivision would.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I don't think it's gonna apply in a subdivision.
So I actually hadn't picked up on that. So a commercial building that's not mixed use is not subject to these standards, no matter how tall or short it is.
Unless it's on one of those street types.
And that's not the way it would read with the way we wrote it. That language, multifamily residential projects or mixed use projects, is limiting no matter which of the other criteria you meet.
Yeah, I didn't catch that either.
I think when I was thinking about what the board was discussing, my thought was that that we would be specifying, regardless of the building type or the use, that if it fronts on one of those 3 street types, then it gets regulated by these material standards.
That's the outcome that I would want, but the way that it's written now, it doesn't say that.
Yeah, I would say.
It's hard for me to think and talk at the same time.
Yeah. So maybe
It might need to be
C.
a letter rather than a bullet point. The street part may need to sort of be at that.
What we want to say is projects shall be subject to the following exterior material classification provisions, where those projects, number 1, are multifamily residential projects or mixed-use projects, which include both residential and non-residential uses, comma, meet the threshold of intermediate or major development review, comma, are greater than 2 stories, comma, or are located on a storefront, principal, or thoroughfare. And that's what you want.
I think we're all on the same page, like in terms of what we're talking about, because that was my understanding, is that the board wants to, regardless of the use, if it fronts on one of those 3 street types, then these are subject to it, regardless of if it's residential, non-residential, mixed use, 2 stories, 100 stories, 1 story.
You could just, I trust Brittany. I'm gonna let her think them right.
Projects, okay, so just.
I have a second yet, so.
Which include,
Okay.
so do you wanna, if you wanted to kind of say that again, Thomas, I can type it up. Projects which include,
Yeah, I got it. You ready?
yes,
Projects shall be subject to the following: exterior material classification provisions,
Revisions.
yeah, thank you. Where those projects, number one, are multifamily residential projects or mixed-use projects? Which include both residential and non-residential uses? Number two, meet the threshold of intermediate or major development plan review. Number three, are greater than 2 stories.
and would it be and or?
It would be neither.
Okay.
And then comma and now we can move in that language, are located on a storefront street. You can just cut and paste from above, yeah.
This is must-see TV for everybody.
Yeah.
Yes.
Everybody in the audience.
See, Juan, we told you you got the good board.
Hanging on every word.
But she used to do this at the county. She invite virally, and I was always jealous that everybody on the board would put up with them writing the motion on it. Now, finally, it's happening for me too.
And so can you
Dreams
just,
do come true.
Exactly. If you aim low, you'll get there.
modify, okay, so just one last clarification, we'd be modifying what particular section?
I think you've got it right.
Okay,
30B. No, sorry, CB.
okay,
Is that right? Yeah, that's right.
Yep.
okay, we did it.
I second.
Okay. With that, we'll go to public comment. Is anyone here to speak on this item tonight? Okay, not seeing anyone, we'll bring it back to the board. For any other comments, or are we ready to vote?
Madam Chair, I just wanted to thank everybody. This has been, I think, a really good process. I wanted to thank James for giving us a lot of his time. Thank Thomas for his input as well. I mean, I think it's a really good step forward for the city. I'm really excited about this one. It's been on my bucket list for a while now.
Yes, yes. I think we've accomplished a lot with the multiple meetings, so I know this took a lot of time, but I agree. I think we've gotten somewhere here. With that, let's go ahead and take the vote. For all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, passes unanimously. One item off of our work list, guys. Only 35 or something left to go. Mr. Castillo, can you read the first item of new business into the record, please?
Petition PB-21-102 LUC, EDA agent, petition for land use change from City of Gainesville mixed-use low intensity and residential medium to planned use district, generally located in 3041-3155 block of Old Archer Road, related to petition PB-21-103 ZON.
And before we get into the presentations, I've submitted a Form 8B for this item as well as the related zoning, and so I'll be recusing myself from these petitions.
I have to recuse myself as well.
Mr. Hurst is also recusing himself. Okay, with that, we'll go into the staff presentation. Ms. McMullen?
Yes, thank you. All right, so this is petition PB 21102 LUC. It is a small-scale land use change. The property is located on Old Archer Road. It's about 5.89 acres in size. the existing land use at the property. There are two different land uses, so the properties further to the east have the land use of residential medium, and the properties to the west are mixed use low intensity. So the request is to amend the City of Gainesville future land use map from the mixed use low intensity and residential medium categories to planned use district. So the staff reviewed the criteria provided to us in the comprehensive plan and the land development code for planned unit or planned use districts, and does find that it meets the criteria. Something unique about this this proposed development is that the planned use district conditions will actually require that 10% of the dwelling units be rented at affordable rates. So all of the conditions are in your backup. I hope you all were able to access that. Some of the specific conditions in the PUD include that the permitted uses shall be limited to multifamily residential, commercial retail uses, office uses, hotel, customary accessory uses to multifamily development, and a parking garage which is integrated into the main buildings. And this is more specifically delineated with the plan development zoning ordinance that you'll see next. So the land use dictates sort of the uses and the densities and things like that. With the next petition that we hear, that will show you the proposed very general layout plan and a little bit more specifics. But the land use category does specify that the maximum number of residential units shall be 240, and this is a residential density of 41 units per acre. This is an increase over the existing allowance for density with the land uses at the property. The maximum number of bedrooms for multifamily units shall not exceed 667. The development shall contain a minimum of 8,000 square feet of non-residential square footage and a maximum of 14,500 square feet. So I believe the intent here is to provide for mixed-use development, but largely the use would be concentrated on residential with a portion of it being commercial. The conditions also specify that a hotel with a maximum of 100 rooms may be substituted for some multifamily residential units, and this would be based on the trip generation substitution. The maximum building height would be 7 stories or 105 feet, whichever is higher. Of course, there's some sort of boilerplate language about the transportation mobility program area requirements needing to be met with development of the site. Vehicular access to the site would be limited to a single access point off of Old Archer Road. An ingress-egress easement is required to be recorded for properties to the south to maintain access to Old Archer Road. In addition, a 10-foot wide paved multi-use path will be provided on the western portion of the property, and this will help pedestrians and bicyclists connect from the property to Archer Road. And I think probably the major difference with this, which will be specified in the associated PD zoning, is the provision of affordable housing units. So if you'd like, I can pull these conditions up for us to all take a look at. But staff does recommend approval of the request, and I believe the applicant is on the call to give a presentation as well.
Thank you, Ms. McMullen. Are there any questions for staff? Not seeing any. I believe Ms. Lazari is on the Zoom. We'll go to the applicant presentation.
Good evening, Madam Chair and Plan Board members. Amelia Lazari with EDA Consultants, Inc. Thank you for your time this evening. Ms. McMullen gave a great presentation concerning a summary of what the PUD, Planned Use District, land use request is. I'm going to bring up a PowerPoint and just ask that you tell me if you can see my screen.
Yes, we can see your PowerPoint.
Thank you very much. So as she indicated, this is a small-scale land use map amendment. It is located off Old Archer Road, and that would be the access to the property. As she indicated, it's about 5.89 plus or minus acres. There are 12 parcels involved, and all of those parcels are currently developed with housing units, either single family or multifamily units that were built in the 1950s and 1960s. The western portion of the property, and I'm going to skip to the land use map here. The western portion of the property has the mixed use low land use designation, and the eastern portion has the residential medium. And so the proposal is to change the land use category on this property to PUD, Planned Use District, for the construction of a mixed use development with apartments, condominiums, and commercial office space. And so some of the key aspects here are that it is a proposed mixed use development that will, via the PD that will be adopted with this, impose transect-like standards on it. It does have an affordable housing component that will operate in perpetuity. It has a multi-use path suggested on the western portion of the site for connectivity, and it will provide new sidewalk connections from the development up to the public sidewalk system on Archer Road. So again, this is the existing future land use map, and this is the proposal for the PUD. Here are some conceptual drawings of the development. This is an aerial type view. And again, you can see this is Old Archer Road here, and this is the driveway system. And as Ms. McMullen pointed out, there is a condition in the PUD and the PD that since this is an existing private road and will be a private driveway through here, that will grant access to some single-family properties that are back here. This is a conceptual view from Old Archer Road. And then this is that driveway entry, again, showing the buildings. And then this is the rear portion of the building. It would be the southeastern view. And please note that landscaping was not included on this, and because we wanted the view of the building, that was what the rendering was about, but it will require perimeter landscaping. Ms. McMullen did a great job of pointing out what the proposed uses on the site are and what the density and the number of units and bedrooms are. The maximum height is 7 stories or 105 feet, whichever is the greater. And there are conditions for a 10-foot wide minimum paved multi-use path along the western property line. And again, that is to provide connectivity up to the Archer Road area. And there are crosswalks and sidewalk system to connect to Archer Road, and then a binding agreement for the provision of affordable housing. We want to point out that this proposal is consistent with the comprehensive plan, specifically future land use element objective 1.5, discourage the proliferation of urban sprawl. This is a redevelopment, so there's no vacant greenfield that's being taken up. Future land use element policy 1.2.3, that the city should encourage mixed use development where appropriate. And the justification report certainly provided evidence that this was a location that was appropriate for new mixed use development. And goal 2, redevelop areas within the city as needed in a manner that promotes quality of life, transportation choice, a healthy economy, and discourages urban sprawl. And basically, this project does all of those things. It is a quality of life improvement in this area. Those are older housing units that are not terribly energy efficient. The proposal is, again, for some affordable housing in it, so that's a quality of life issue. Transportation choice is promoted with the density there. There are 4 transit routes that serve this area. A healthy economy is promoted with the mix of uses and the new construction that will provide some jobs. And again, we have indicated that we are discouraging urban sprawl by reusing an existing built site. There are several more criteria. I don't want to run through all of these unless there are specific questions from the board about them. And I will be happy to answer those. I will point out that there are no identified environmental resources on the site. Basically, this is a developed site, as we've indicated, and that, again, that the housing units that are there are older, 1950s, 1960s construction, but they are not in a historic district. And there is a condition both in the PUD, it's condition 17, requiring a binding agreement that the development provide affordable housing, and the associated PD condition 18 also requires that. And with that, I would be happy to answer any questions that the board might have. We would like to request that you approve petition PB 21-102 LUC.
Thank you, Ms. Lazari. We have a couple of lights, I think. Sophia, you were first.
Thank you. So my first question is about which of the units are going to be designated affordable. I noticed you have specified condo units and student apartments. So my first question is which of those will be affordable? And then my second question is this binding agreement of affordable units, does that suddenly go away if the option to put a hotel with 100 units is sought after? And if so, which units are lost, student apartments or condo units? And would that also mean you're forfeiting the affordable units?
Let me try to answer those questions, and please tell me if I don't hit all of the answers that you need. The first is that the affordable housing units would be in the rental area, but it would be 10% of the total number of units that are at the site. So whatever the number of units is, no matter what the mix of condominiums or rentals is, 10% of those would be affordable. So at this point, say for example, it's the 240 maximum units that are allowed, then 24 of those units would be affordable. And I'm sorry, I hope I've answered all your questions, but is that everything that you were asking?
So the second question was about, I noticed like there's 2 potential plans for this project, and one of them being that there could be 100 hotel rooms. I'm wondering, are you no longer going to have affordable units at that point if you do go with that hotel option, or is there still going to be 10% designated affordable of whatever's remaining of condos or rental units?
Yes, the way the condition reads is that whatever 10% of the units are at the site, the dwelling units are, that those would be affordable. So if some hotel units are substituted, those would be subtracted from the total number of dwelling units, but still 10% of those units in perpetuity would be affordable housing units.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Ackerman, I think you're next.
I'm actually was asking the same question. And it wasn't clear to me what happened if in fact the option to add 100 hotel rooms, theoretically a total 240 units, 24 affordable units. If you take out 100 and turn it into hotel, does that mean you have 14 affordable units?
Whatever the remaining number of units, either condominium, dwelling units, either condominium or rental, is that the way the condition reads, that 10% of those would be affordable units.
So the option to add 100 hotel rooms potentially really reduces the amount of affordable housing that you're proposing.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Newman?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Focusing on the same topic, how many current how many units are there right now?
There are 12 properties involved in this, one of which is vacant. So that leaves us 11 developed lots. And I believe that there are either 2 or 3 of those lots that have duplexes on them. So we're probably talking about maybe 15 units.
Okay. So, so 15 units. So just as it's been a long time since I've been back there. I don't know this for a fact, but those are probably targeted. Those are probably fairly low rent places, and I don't know. However, we define sort of affordable. It seems like that that essentially the proposal is sort of taking out probably what would be sort of affordable housing right now, and potentially putting in more, which might be good. Some of the questions have already been asked. And I come back to a question that keeps perplexing me when it comes to these changes in land use like this. There is a criteria about that there needs to be that there has to be a need for additional acreage in that future land use category, and so it's kind of, whenever I kind of look at these things, and it's hard to sort of judge, and every time something comes in front of us, it's always just based off of some sort of acreage, like, oh well, there's this much acreage, and now there's gonna be this much acreage, and so it just if that's a criteria, I feel like we need to sort of better define what need is. And obviously there could be some rationalization for this potential sort of change, but just going from just trying to say we need more PUD in this area, it doesn't really make any sense to me. So so what I understand is that theoretically there could be 240 units. Theoretically there could be 24 affordable housing units, but that could be reduced to potentially about what the same amount of potential affordable units are there right now, if a hotel was put in there. So, thank you.
Yeah, if I may comment on that criteria, which is the need for additional acreage in the proposed future land use category, that's actually something that is in sort of state law as a criteria for a land use change. And in the case of a planned use district, it's a very difficult type of analysis to make. You have to make a subjective analysis on this, because planned use district is a specialized district unique to the character and area that's proposed for the change. It's to allow specialized uses that under normal circumstances would not happen in that area. And that's exactly why this is being proposed, to allow for the mixed use development there with the 7 stories to get the additional density and height and the number of units and bedrooms, and to include the affordable housing conditions. So again, subjectively, I think that you can state that there is a need for this PUD to offer that to the city of Gainesville.
Thank you. Let's see, Mr. Blythe, you're next.
Hey, just a quick question on, you showed the building renderings, and they seemed pretty nice, other than the back. I guess I call it the back. It seemed, I don't know if you could possibly pull that up one more time. I know you'd remove landscaping and completely understand that part, But I'd like to look at that back or rear facade one more time.
Okay, I'll be happy to share my screen again.
And I know this is early in the process, but I would like to put it just out there that if there's not a reason for that facade to be so blank, such as it needs to potentially be ready for something in the future to be built against it, or if it's right up against the property line, that it would be good to have, you know, more something on that facade.
Again, let me point out that the landscaping was not included so that the building would be visible. So that will make an appreciable difference. These are, I
We aren't
believe,
seeing it
elevator
yet.
towers.
Miss Lazari, we aren't seeing it right now.
I'm terribly sorry. Let me try to get to my, let me try, I didn't hit share. I apologize and
That's
I didn't
okay.
ask.
It looks like it's coming up now. There it is.
There we go. Thank you.
Okay, I apologize. I didn't hit share. Again, just to repeat, the landscaping was not illustrated on here. These are, I believe, elevator towers, so those blanks are there. The primary area here is on the ground floor is recreational amenity for the building on the east side, and some of the trying to kind of back of house functions, and some of the ground floor area is the parking garage that's integrated into the building. I don't know if Mr. Reyes or Mr. Swager want to hop in and add any detail, but this is, again, just conceptual at this time for the rear.
Right, and that's why I mention it. I know that there'll still be further design, but I think at this point, there needs to be a lot more kind of design, even if it's elevator or stair towers, something that breaks it up. So I think I would just put that as a note. And of course, the landscaping will help, other than if you're in that amenity area, looking at the back of a hospital. So that's all I had. I think one note that I would tie into the idea of the affordable housing for me would be, I don't like the idea of removing what could be existing affordable housing. I guess we don't really know. It could ramp up. You know, I think we've mentioned that 24 may be a maximum. But then I don't like the idea over time of the story that could be told that in the beginning there was affordable housing, and then over time the affordable housing was removed piece by piece. So I think I would be in favor of some idea that if there's an affordable housing piece that is established in the beginning, that kind of remains and can't adjust downward if additional hotel was brought in, just because of the idea of getting it in to get the project in and then kind of removing it over time. I think.
Let me point out two things. That in the PD, it indicates that the affordable housing units, the 10% is in perpetuity for the project. But you need to, understand that it is proportional to the number of units that are built that are dwelling units. So if the applicant chooses to include hotel rooms versus multifamily units, that's just part of the proportion that would be in operation.
Right, and I understand that. I think it's just, can we set a minimum that it can't go over? I mean, can you go
Madam
down
Chair,
to
this is
zero?
Sergio Reyes. May I speak a second? Can I explain a little bit more?
Sure.
The affordable housing component is never gonna go away because it's limited the number of bedrooms for the hotel and rooms for the hotel. It's 100, so it's never gonna be replaced completely the total number of units, dwelling units. So there's always is gonna be affordable housing. Also, one thing to keep in mind, the transferring from hotel rooms to dwelling units is not one-to-one. One of the conditions is based on the traffic study. So of course, that's how the transfer of units is there. But always is gonna be, that's the reason we limited the number of the hotel rooms to 100, it never replace completely the number of residential units. So always is gonna be affordable housing units in this project.
Okay, that answers my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hawkins?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I love urban development, and I would love for this community to have more high-quality urban development. I lived in Atlanta for 3 years when I was younger. I always tell people, this is true, that I lived in Atlanta, most important lesson I learned is I need to come back to Gainesville. But one interesting thing about how Atlanta has developed is it's got this sort of running hopscotch of towers coming north of downtown. And the first two are very urban in downtown and midtown. But then you come up to Buckhead and Perimeter City and these suburban areas that have towers. So very urban type buildings, but they're not in an urban setting. And you don't get more pedestrian activity. You don't get more of that human interaction that we're looking for in mixed-use development and urban development. Because in order for those things to happen, you need an interconnected street network of reasonably sized blocks. You need places that people can walk to. And I'll give a great example of this. This development is literally catty corner across an intersection from a Whole Foods. I guarantee you, none of the residents of this development are going to walk to Whole Foods, right? Have y'all ever walked that intersection? I've walked that intersection. It's like, this is not a part of town where you want to be on foot. I think we need to be thinking about strategies for this part of town to become more urban, but just plopping a development that's 40 units per acre surrounded by single-family houses and suburban apartment complexes doesn't accomplish that. The path there needs to look at first upgrading the public infrastructure. Looking at maybe subdividing this piece of property is 6 acres. In downtown, that would be 6 city blocks. 3 streets east to west, 3 streets north to south. 2 streets east to west, 3 north to south. For 6 complete city blocks. And that's the scale of it. But it's just 2 buildings. I think this is absolutely wrong project in the wrong place. If we want to look at urban density, we need to continue on the path that we're going with urban density near downtown, urban density near Depot Park, urban density near campus. Yes, technically this is near campus. It's not near the part of campus that gets a lot of pedestrian traffic. I want to mention some specific things about the development proposal. I agree with Mr. Blythe. The front looks fine. I don't have any problem with it. The back looks awful. And if you're its neighbor, that's what you're seeing, right? We're not worried about what the Verizon wireless store on the north side of Archer Road sees, right? We're worried what the neighbors see. The setbacks, Ms. Lazari mentioned there's going to be landscaping. The setback at the rear is 10 feet, right? So the landscaping that's going to hide that 105-foot structure is going to be planted in a 10-foot width between the building and the property line. On the west, the setback's 15 feet, but 10 feet of that is a paved multi-use path. There's 5 feet to put in landscaping. And then on the east side, the setback is 5 feet between the building and the property line. So there's not, we're not getting there. A little bit about Old Archer Road. I don't know if y'all have walked on Old Archer Road. There's only a sidewalk on the south side. There's no pedestrian access on the north side. The road is strip paved, right? So there's no curb and gutter. In a modest rain, that sidewalk floods. I've jogged on it in a summer sprinkle, and it's got an inch of water on it. If we're talking about adding this really high density in this area, we need to be looking at urban infrastructure, like a street with curb and gutter, off-site transportation improvements. How does this relate to RTS? How does it relate to the pedestrian network in the area? Even though this is an urban building, it's suburban development and will only function as suburban development. I just don't see how I don't see how this can be a good idea. Those are my thoughts.
Madam Chair, may I make a few remarks about those comments, please?
Sure.
Yeah, I did want to point out that this development is very close to the University Town Center and very walkable along Old Archer Road. There is a sidewalk that would connect there. So it is walkable to that. It will have some mixed use component within it itself also. There is a bicycle path just east of this that runs all the way down to the University of Florida campus. We will be required to put in an 8-foot wide sidewalk along the property frontage and then connect to the sidewalk system along Archer Road. There are 4 transit routes that serve this property. I understand that it is not in the downtown or in the University Heights area. However, the way to transition to get to that is to allow for the density in this area. We know these transit routes are used. We know there's a lot of bicycling that goes on out in this area. So we do think it's supportive of multimodal transportation.
Thank you, Ms. Lazari. Sophia, no, you're good? Okay, then back to Mr. Ackerman.
Actually, I was going to expand a little bit on what Ms. Lazari just said. I actually agree with Mr. Hawkins. It happens.
2 in one night.
Yeah.
Wow.
Except for, I think we have this problem all the time, and as we deal with ongoing development, is that there's a chicken and egg issue. There's no incentive for the city to ever improve the infrastructure if there's just 13 little tiny single-family houses there. And I agree, this is really at the tail end. It is in the vicinity of Butler Plaza. It is in the vicinity of that area. The infrastructure is pretty primitive right now along Old Archer Road right there. And weirdly enough, I actually have looked at this some time ago, and it's kind of an odd little rural enclave in the city. And I happen to live in one of those, and I really like it. And but this one is not well loved, and it clearly, whoever's living there is probably it would be affordable housing, although somewhat dilapidated. And but I think we got the problem of if we never build anything, it's never going to change. And if we decide we're going to do it in increments, like, we'll do 2 stories, then you end up, you're kicking the can down the road so far, because that'll last 30 years, 40 years, and that just doesn't seem realistic. I kind of like the idea of, letting it stand on its own and assume that it's going to spur additional development that will be intensifying the density in the general vicinity of the University of Florida. This is at the far end of it, but nonetheless, there's a fair amount of density around there already. Except for me, I don't mind this project. I'm a little unhappy about the movable, affordable housing, and we'll have to talk about that.
Mr. Hawkins?
I just want to, I agree with everything that you've said too, but I want to propose like a really simple idea that's actually in the code that answers that chicken and egg question. The real difference between suburban development and urban development, yes, intensity plays a part, yes, density plays a part. The real distinction is the character of the street network, right? Even in a relatively underdeveloped downtown, you've got an urban character that can be walkable. When when land has a transect designation as part of the development review process, staff will look at the block size. And if the blocks are too big, the applicant's going to have to make some change to reintroduce streets and get incrementally towards that walkable street network. right? So I'm not suggesting that we can't have urban development in this area. What I'm suggesting is this development is gonna function like a very high-density suburban development. I mean, I don't know what the perimeter of this block is, but I would bet it's a couple of miles.
Yeah,
If you came out and made right turns until you ended back up where you were again, you'd have gone all the way down to the traffic circle by the, the IFAS farms.
Yeah, no, there's no actual block system set up there.
So my suggestion is that we never say yes to urban development, but this is not what we need. Again, that's my opinion on the application. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Are we in member comment yet? Or are we still asking?
Well, essentially, I mean, the applicant's given their presentation, so if you have questions for them or just comments on the presentation before we go to the public, go ahead.
No, I was ready for member comment.
Oh, okay. Any other questions about the project? Otherwise, we'll probably do public comment next and then come back to the board. That works for everybody? Okay, so going to the public that's here, is there anyone here to speak on this item this evening? If so, please step up to the microphone. Mr. Shepherd.
My name's Donald Shepherd, People's Representative, and as a People's Representative, I'm wondering why a project of this stature hasn't been offered to the East Gainesville. Is the county not, ears been, the county's ears not been pulled to take and develop on the east side? Because this is a great plan, layout and everything, but as Mr. Hawkins says, the format of it is not right. And so until he and I can take and come to agreement on this, I don't see where this should be passed. We need to take him more review. That's my comments. And like I said, we need more of this planning in East Gainesville. So how do I get a hold of somebody to take and get this kind of developments in East Gainesville? Does the county have their own planning board?
The county does have a planning board.
Okay, thank you.
We're just looking at what's proposed this evening, so thank you for your comments.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the public to speak to this item tonight? Yeah, come up to the microphone, please, and state your name for the record.
Sure, my name is James Brown. I'm curious about the proposal to have 10% of the suites or the apartments or homes as low-income residences. My curiosity is, when it comes to setting the matrix for who is low income or what is low income and affordable, I wonder who is responsible for that. Is it going to be the developer or is it going to be the city? And my other question is how would that be applied in a way that's equitable? Like we've mentioned here tonight, there are people that live there now that probably live in affordable housing. Will they have access to this property if it does become developed? Thank you.
I don't know if staff wants to respond to that.
Sure, I can add some things, and then I think the applicant can probably even be a little bit more specific. So in the corresponding zoning application that we're going to hear next, which would implement the affordable units, there's a little bit more specific language as to what affordable means, and it also specifies, let me see here, I can actually read you the language. So, and again, this is part of the next application, but it's related to the same property and development. So tenant screening, selection, and income verification for affordable units shall be coordinated with a public agency, such as but not limited to the City of Gainesville Housing and Community Development Department, the Gainesville Housing Authority, or the Alachua County Housing Authority. So basically what that condition requires is that it does have to be coordinated through an outside entity. It can't just be left up to the developer to make that determination. And it further specifies if a vacancy occurs in an affordable unit and an eligible tenant cannot be identified by a public agency within 60 days, that vacancy may be filled by the owner developer. So basically, it gives the first right of filling those units to the public agency that's involved. I don't think that the plans, I don't think that they know for sure which public agency they're going to use yet. Maybe the applicant can speak more to that issue.
Ms. Lazari, did you want to add to that?
Yes, I did want to also, I believe there was a question about the qualification or the income level. It is set at 80% of the of median income for families. Those are the affordable units. And at this stage, we do not know which agency. It could be all of those agencies and additional agencies that provide referrals for tenants.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from the public? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the board for discussion or a motion. Sophia.
Thank you. So I think after listening to a lot of what's been said, I just wanted to add back to the whole discussion of affordable housing, student apartments, condominiums. I think if we're thinking about the criteria the city has set about, meeting the needs for the land areas we're using and meeting the goals of the comprehensive plan, I find it a little weird to be designating student apartments and also designating a portion of those units to be affordable for families when there are families who are not students who do also need rental units, not condominiums necessarily. Maybe they're just renters and don't need or can't afford to purchase property at that time. So I think that's a little bit conflating, and I think just the conversation about urban development in this area and the fact that right now those units are relatively affordable. There are definitely most likely probably people living there right now. I don't see how a planned use district is most fitting at this time, so I would make a motion to deny PB-21-102 LUC.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion on that, or do we want to go to a vote? Okay.
Actually,
Mr. Blythe.
so the idea of bringing the density to kind of reduce sprawl, I do want to point out that this would bring density closer to kind of the areas that we're trying to get density. So there is maybe some discussion to be had about that. I mean, this does have an affordable housing, component to it. I do get that not everybody may be able to fit into a certain type of offering. And I don't know if we're necessarily getting into whether these are like one bedrooms or multiple bedroom units, but I would say that based on the current use of the land, that just letting it kind of be as is probably not appropriate either. So I would just welcome some discussion on that, whether it's to help this applicant or a revision of it, but it just seems like we just talked about the fact that the block is like over a mile, on each side. So we know that we can't have a certain thing, but it feels like there's like a really big difference between 12 units that are kind of run down now and having it be in the middle of kind of an urban area. I don't know that this area can be that. So there's got to be like somewhere in between that's reasonable without saying, all right, you can't do anything on this property. Go find something where it's easier, and it's going to be probably farther away. So I think I would just be interested in that idea of it's already on existing transit routes. I know from this area you can bike or walk to campus pretty close, especially if you're going to that like southwest area of campus. And so there is already kind of a lot of that in that area. So this isn't like in the middle of nowhere. So I would be interested in some discussion on that because I think I'm leaning on the other side of it. So I'd like to hear about it a little more.
Thomas?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Member Blythe gave a lot of really good food for thought. I want to comment on affordable housing for a second. We heard a PUD 2 or 3 months ago for this development where Miami Subs used to be. Y'all know what I'm talking about? They came forward with the affordable housing idea, and they had already negotiated a contract with the Gainesville Housing Corporation. I know I'm butchering the name, you know, Bob.
The Gainesville Housing Authority.
Was it the Gainesville Housing Authority? It was, okay. I felt good about that application and their affordable housing plans because they had hashed out a lot of the details that we're talking about with their not-for-profit partner, and had entered that agreement and brought it to us. I think that if we want to make zoning decisions with these affordable housing ideas baked in to our comp plan amendments, that's a good model, and I wouldn't want to do something less, which this is. To Member Blythe's suggestion, I see a couple things. One, if we're talking about apartment housing for the general population being located here, I think that there would be a question of maybe it going further out, right? And that this is a better location if they're further out. For student housing, I don't necessarily see that. I don't think the market's pushing student housing to the other side of the interstate, for example. I think that question of how far west is product specific. I think that we're on the same page and same thinking. The question is what behavior this board is going to get that outcome. I like the idea of voting against things when they don't meet our standards, because the applicant can come back and propose a new comp plan amendment, right? That's not. No, I hear you laughing. And I used to work in push applications for clients. I know how much work goes into these, but it's totally right. If this didn't make it, you regroup, you figure out why, and you submit it again. If this motion fails, though, we can continue it, and you know the applicant's listening carefully to what they're saying. They can make changes before it comes back. So I'm definitely in support of the motion on the floor, but if it fails, right, I think that there is a path forward along the way you described. We can continue it and know that the applicant has heard everything that we're saying. Maybe they want to find a transect designation, and because that comes with those urban design standards that aren't necessarily incorporated with the PUD.
Madam Chair, I know that Mr. Swager wants to make some remarks, but I wanted to make a comment about the prior applicant and the memorandum of understanding that they had with the Gainesville Housing Authority, and ask Ms. McMullen to discuss what she has worked with the city attorney. The agreement that this development is proposing is to be directly with the city of Gainesville, and it's my understanding that that is the direction that they are turning to with the other applicant, and maybe Ms. McMullen can provide some enlightenment on that.
Sure. So on that project, they do have a memorandum of understanding with the Gainesville Housing Authority. I think in talking further about the enforceability of that MOU by the city attorney is also going to want a developer's agreement. Separate from that, they're a little concerned that the city may not be able to enforce it if it's just with the two private parties. So that's just sort of the background on that. You know, not to say that there can't also be a memorandum of understanding. So, yeah, it's just a little background info.
Okay. Mr. Swager, did you want to add to that before we go to the next?
Yeah, Madam Chair, thanks. This is Clay Swager with EDA. I did want to make a few comments. I appreciate this conversation, and this is definitely a unique area. There's no doubt about it. It's in the center of our city. It has very low density residential development that's there today. But, you know, I would contend that this is the kind of project with an increased density that we need to help improve some of those gaps in infrastructure. This project would bring some density along that will help bring some of the infrastructure that we need in the form of prioritizing this area for redevelopment, and the city coming along with improvements, TMPA, transportation impact fee payments made into this district from this project, which will be substantial, which could help this area. Also, I did want to just clarify too that the University Town Center, which is a PD almost right next door to the west, has an existing sidewalk network that links all the businesses in there. It's at least over 12 restaurants and other types of services are right there within walking distance, and there is a sidewalk along Old Archer Road. That road certainly could use some improvement, and I think that could be part of this discussion and what happens, financial walkable ability for services for folks who would live here. I think that the comprehensive plan, and I'm not sure if the city comp plan still identifies that as an activity center, but certainly that interchange or that intersection of Archer and 34th Street is a mixed use activity center meant to encourage and promote higher density development in that area. So I agree it would be tough and not real great to have to walk over to Butler Plaza, but there's definitely a good amount of commercial activity on our side of the street and with existing sidewalk networks. And what Ms. Lazari said too, I think is really important is there are 4 routes of RTS service here. This is the best transit served area we have in our entire city. So what better place to have higher density? That's what we try to do, is put these in places with the infrastructure, including RTS. And I wanted to clarify too that this project is not as big of an area as maybe we had discussed here earlier tonight. It's not anything close to a 2-mile perimeter. I think we're actually under 2,000 linear feet for the entire perimeter of the project, so it's pretty compact. It's not as huge as we might have thought. So I did a little bit of math on that real quick while the discussion was happening and I was listening in. So I just wanted to mention that too. And certainly we understand that the plan board can make any recommendation they want, but if there are conditions that may want to be changed rather than a full denial, we would certainly, I think we would be all ears to hear that. I think that's it. I just wanted to make some clarifying comments and add a little bit of additional information for your deliberation tonight. Thanks.
Okay, Mr. Ackerman, you're next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I kind of agree with Mr. Blythe. I still go back to the chicken and egg thing, and I would rather hatch the chicken and encourage the city to begin to improve the infrastructure there. Also, I think we need to encourage the model that has affordable housing components being in it. This is really a recent thing, and it's a good thing. I would also add, though, that we have the ability to pile costs onto developers by delaying, canceling, saying no, saying, you know, we're far better off and far more likely to get the affordable housing units we want if we try to minimize the red tape that developers have to live through. And so I'm very much opposed to denying this petition, and I would be inclined to have a requirement that they have an absolute number of 24 units as a minimum number, regardless of whether they have a hotel or not. And then I have, and Mr. Schweger is right, there is a pretty good mixed-use development to the west, and I can see this. And an awful lot of the stuff that's further to the east is what I would call older apartment complexes, and I can see those beginning to redevelop in the near future also.
Okay, Mr. Newman?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a question. So just, and again, I think we're all on the same page about trying to increase affordable housing. And I guess what I don't quite see a path to is, And again, I don't know who's living there right now. It could be grad students, right? It could be, you know, in this area, but, you know, it's, you know, when we talk about sort of affordable housing, I think we also need to be talking about like what kind of affordable housing and who we're trying to sort of target this for. So, and I don't know what we can sort of do to help be more specific. So, I mean, you know, creating, you know, affordable housing for, yeah, I don't know. I just, is there, how can we, when we sort of talk about affordable housing, if, for example, we're sort of displacing, you know, families, how can we, you know, incentivize or require, you know, if new affordable housing sort of comes in, that it's basically, you know, families, it's family affordable housing versus just, you know, small little units for low-income folks. Is there any way that we can try to address that?
Mr. Persons, I see your light. I don't know if it's related or if you can respond to that as well.
Yeah, no, I think it is related. I think Christian brings up a really excellent point, and something that I think has been something I could tell you from, you know, from our standpoint as staff who are involved in some of the affordable housing discussions. It is something that we're grappling with. You know, we've brought, I think this is the second of a couple of these sort of somewhat ad hoc PD where we've like worked with the developer to bring to incorporate an affordable housing component. I can tell you from my standpoint, like one of the critical parts of this is on the programmatic side. It's both in terms of of connecting these subsidized units with the families that are already on affordable housing list. We had been having a steering committee meeting with some of the affordable housing nonprofits here in town, and Gainesville Housing Authority, they have about 2,500 families right now on their wait list for public or housing subsidy. And so I think one of the things that we talked about internally is the need for the city, either the city, you know, incorporate this function into some of what we do internally, or having a more formalized partnership with a Gainesville Housing Authority or another nonprofit housing provider to do all the kind of nuts and bolts stuff like tenant screening, bringing tenants to these projects, doing income verification over the life of the project. There is I could say there is a great need for that. It's not something that the city is currently sort of staffed up appropriately to do. But I think that's why you see when we're bringing these projects before you, that importance of either of having a public nonprofit or housing agency component to it, because I think that's something that's a gap currently. But I think having that, you start to connect people from that, you know, for families that on that wait list with these units as they're coming online. And making sure that, you know, that the intent of that is being maintained for the life of the project. So I think it is being worked on. I think I can tell you from the city's standpoint, one of the things that we're working on from the policy side is some of the discussions around inclusionary housing. I think having a more formalized policy, as well as having the actual, you know, infrastructure in terms of staff, and programs on the back end, is going to make a lot of this less of an ad hoc basis and more of something that's just a normal course of doing business. But I can tell you, I know it's been difficult for some of the folks that are bringing these proposals, because so little of it has really kind of been hashed out. We're sort of we're building the plane as we're flying.
Okay, Ms. Corrugado, do you still have something? I know your light was on for a while.
Oh, no, it's not on.
Oh, was it you, Mr. Blythe?
I had one on.
Sorry. Okay.
Oh, yeah, that's
Sorry.
okay. Yeah.
Trying to keep the numbers straight.
No, I don't even know that I completely remember. I will say the affordable housing has probably been the thing that's been talked about the most, and it is a super important topic, but it is also a relatively small portion of the project and the overall density that it brings. So I think there is some discussion here. Everybody's interested in this idea of we don't want it to go away. We know that it most likely at max capacity would not go below 14. But I think a lot of people liked the idea of it being somewhere closer to the maximum and staying there, because then you get another 10, and that can't go away. So the delta of 10 is important. I think everybody would agree that gaining it would be really important. One thing that we haven't talked about is the hotel potential here. And the fact that there's not really, that I'm aware of, there's not really a hotel that's this close and in that area. And that some of the ability for that not to have to be out by the highway, especially with the new sports facilities that are going in, like the new baseball stadium is literally right across Archer and through some woods. But there is a potential of that piece being kind of what Thomas was referring to as like a driver of economics. Now, we've mostly focused on that as a could happen. But if it did happen, that would be a very big incentive to make Old Archer Road a very different kind of development. And that would probably drive a lot of infrastructure improvement, I would think. I mean, instantly the trip count would go up. It is a odd secondary road, so I probably would look at Jason and be like, what sort of retail or other kind of commercial establishments might happen there? But it is this odd in between, like right off the main road sort of scenario. But I don't know, there's a lot of potential on the table, and for this to have to go back through another full cycle, I mean, we've just told, the 14 affordable people, sorry, you're gonna have to wait. On that 2,500 person list, you're gonna have to wait another cycle. So I would say unless there's a really good reason to recommend this with ideas. I mean, it's not going to stop here, or it's not going to go all the way forward here. So I think the idea of if we can propose something that we think would be useful, I think that would be a more useful step, in my opinion, rather than just say, come back with another idea. And to be fair, I get it. I know, I understand the reason to not be for it. But it's a very odd condition where it is, And I think to me, if the hotel component was not part of it, I don't think it would get the infrastructure and some of the trip counts up as quickly. But I still think 140 units or whatever would go in as part of phase one is a dramatic increase in density in an area of town that should not be 12 units. So I think there's a lot here to focus on in terms of the potential. I don't think it is going to be a perfect solution, quite frankly, but it's got to be something better than kind of what's there now.
You want perfection.
I know. It's very, I know, I get it. It is difficult. And I was complaining about the rear facade, so
Sophia.
Thank you. So I think just to bounce off the hotel discussion, I think it's just important to consider the fact that we'd be getting a hotel at the expense of displacing whoever's living there right now. So if I start to think about how I could potentially see this in terms of not wanting to just simply deny it, but maybe work through what we have, I literally listed out conditions that I don't know might be too far-fetched, and that's why my initial decision was to simply deny, because I think we just have two different visions right now. But looking at this, I think the first thing I would do is remove condition 18-C, where it says within 60 days of a vacancy, it can be filled by a market rate tenant. Totally don't think that that should be allowed. If you're saying that this is going to be affordable in perpetuity, it should be the case. And I think if you're not filling that, then the eligibility should be adjusted before you go straight into filling that with the market rate tenant. I agree this should absolutely at the minimum be 24 units regardless of the hotel. I think that there should be some plans in place for who's going to be displaced there right now, because we, like you mentioned, maybe there's 14 folks in line for affordable housing right now that might get pushed back, but there's 14 folks in housing right now who would be removed and have to figure out where to live next. So if there's plans in place for those folks living there now, I would something I'd want to see for not only when they're displaced, but also are they going to be, if they wanted the option to be rehoused in a new project, to see that as well. So I think that's kind of where I'm at right now when I think about, again, the criteria the city has in place for pursuing the, I'm sorry, I actually had one more. Don't like the language of student apartments. I think that is still exclusionary. That needs to go. I think there's people in Gainesville who are families, who are not students, who need housing, especially when we think about who's in line right now for affordable housing. It's probably not students. It's probably your local Gainesville family. So I wouldn't want to see that it's condominiums or student apartments. Why can't it just be apartments? So I'm happy to repeat those, say those again, but that's just kind of where I'm seeing this right now in terms of being reasonable to approve a plan use district, if not to outright deny. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We do have a motion on the table, so I'm not seeing any other lights right now. Do we want to vote on the motion on the table? Okay, so we're gonna vote. I'm gonna ask that it's a roll call vote because I think it's gonna be split and Jason and I are recusing ourselves. So if we can do a roll call vote on this one, so we get the numbers straight.
Roll call vote.
So the motion is to deny the petition. So voting yes would deny the petition, just for clarification for everybody. Yes is a no. Okay, Mr. Castillo.
Okay, I'm just gonna go down. If you've recused yourself, just.
That'll work.
Stephanie Sutton? Christian Newman? Bob Aikman?
And my name is Ackerman. And I vote no too.
James Blythe?
No.
Jason Hurst?
Same.
Sophia Corrigetto?
Yes.
Thomas Hawkins?
Yes.
So we got 3 no's and 2 yeses.
Okay, so that motion failed. So, putting it back to you all for an alternative motion, for a motion to continue the item with some recommendations. I think the applicants asked us to maybe give direction and change conditions instead. Mr. Hawkins?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm gonna make a motion with some ideas that I heard, but I know I'm missing some from you, Mr. Blythe. So if you want anything, let me know. But this represents at least the comments that Member Corrigator gave. So I move that the plan board continue petition PB-21-102 LUC with a request that staff modify the proposed conditions to number 1, strike condition 18-C. And I didn't double check that, so we need to make sure that reference is right.
That's actually in the PD zoning conditions,
Right.
not the PUD.
Thank you. Is there an analogous provision? I'm looking in Ms. Corrigato.
I'm looking now.
All right, so I'll go ahead. We'll make mine number 2, number 1. Require a minimum number of 24 affordable units without regard to the total number of residential units developed. I got that. That would be 10% of the allowed maximum 240. Number 2, require streets within the project so that no development occurs on a block larger than 2,000 feet in perimeter, which is a really big block. It's not a small block. For reference, the ones in this part of town are like 800 feet. But that will at least ensure that we get streets introduced. And then 3, require the project to meet the transect frontage standards along all streets, not just Old Archer.
And just making sure that those transect requirements are called out in the PUD land use and not the.
I would want them in the PUD land use. even if they're not there now.
Okay. If
somebody wants to second it, I'm totally open to keep working on it.
I've got a question. I really liked the idea, and I don't know if it's feasible, of that mechanism and increasing the 60 days. Because that struck me too as like oh my gosh, like if you can't find somebody for whatever reason, it could turn over. Is there any kind of way to lengthen that? I mean, I don't know if that's like part of this. It feels like it's like out of it, but it also feels like a really important question to ask, if that can be.
Sure, so I can provide a little more information on that. So that will, again, be part of the PD zoning, which we talk about next, but also completely relevant to what we're talking about now. I know it's hard to talk about the two at a different time, but what we base that on is the standard that was used for the prior application that was brought for the Lincoln Ventures project. So we were going based off of that, but you can suggest different conditions.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
We have really wide latitude to include standards in a PUD comp plan amendment. So if we wanted to set a different number, we absolutely can do it with a new condition in the PUD. I mean, that would be perfectly appropriate. If we know that we want that, it would be perfectly appropriate to add it to the motion. Is that?
Yeah, I would agree. It's at your discretion.
I mean, we don't have a motion yet, so I'll just keep modifying my motion. I'll add a number 4. I've got the land use change in front of me, not the PUD, not the PD. Hold on a second. Thank you for your patience. So I would add that we add a provision that if a vacancy occurs in an affordable unit, an eligible tenant cannot be identified by a public agency within 180 days of that vacancy being noticed. Of the vacancy being noticed to the agencies, sorry. The owner developer will be permitted to fill the vacant units with market rate tenants.
So what happens when that market tenant goes away? Does it now automatically go back that it is an affordable unit? Or is it, now it's just lost? How does that, what has happened with that?
Mr. Ackerman, I think,
I'm
has a
sorry to
response.
interrupt in this, but I deal with placing people in housing every day through Grace Marketplace. I can assure you, the backlog is so great that the possibility that they will not find somebody to put in there is so remote that it's laughable. I mean, it truly is. You're concerned about something based on a lack of information about how this actually happens. We have a huge number of people who need affordable housing right now. If we get to the point where this is a problem, hooray for us.
Yeah.
So
Once we
I
get through
honestly
the
don't think
2,500 people.
this is a key issue, and I don't think I would spend a lot. In fact, I would forget about it. I think it's just not important. I would add, though, is that, the affordable units have the same fits and finishes and are indistinguishable from the market rate units.
So I might need a little help with the wording there.
Same fits and finishes as market rate units.
So where I mentioned things that I still don't see, but I understand if not everyone is on the same page as me, but I still had 2 other contingencies about the issue of displacing the folks we have now and there being potential to rehouse them, and also the idea of removing student apartments and solely being regular units that are not only available to students.
I'm happy to make both of those. Can you help with wording a little bit? Is the student housing language currently in the PUD?
I mean, I saw student apartments multiple times in this document.
There's no definition for student
Yeah.
housing, is there?
I don't think student housing is listed in
I
that.
don't- I mean, I think they've just called it that because they hope it'll be
Was that just
students,
in the
but.
staff
I
report?
mean, what we could do, Mr. Irrigator, that might make sense. The big difference between student housing and family housing is in student housing you get a lot of instances where you've got 4 bedrooms, 4 baths leased by the bedroom. So if we were interested in doing that, we could say something like the affordable units. We could specify a certain floor plan, like they can't be 5 bedroom, 5 bath, or and I don't know if we want to do that, but that's the direction that I would go in if we wanted to make sure these were family units, not student units.
Sure, I mean, I think of units like, or buildings like 13th Street Apartments, where you really only see students living there, where it's a 3 and a 4 floor plans that are typically going to be marketed to students, and you're typically only going to be seeing students living there. So just anything that would just, I guess maybe like you said, specific to the floor plan and pricing as well. I know, for instance, in student apartments, you'll lease by the bedroom. No family is going to do that. They're going to lease a 2-1 or a 3-1. They're not going to lease a separate bedroom for their kid or something like that. So when thinking about how we're leasing the units, to really not specifically market them towards students in that way where you're leasing by the bedroom.
I would love, does staff have any suggestion on how you would define a unit that's not a student unit? Like maybe floor plan designed to be rented by the entire unit and indeed rented by the entire unit? Like that? That's vague, because what's designed to be rented by the unit.
Okay, and let me just say, so I think your idea about specifying floor plan types would probably be the only way you could do this, because you can't discriminate on who is able to lease the units. Yeah, if you're having the idea about, I think you're on the right track with, if it's 4 bedrooms, 4 baths, probably going to be students. But maybe other unit types and things like that. But I don't know, the applicant might have more thoughts based on the owner, the builder's intentions, and maybe they can tell you more about the proposed floor plans. And you could specify, okay, they need to be these types of floor plans, I believe. That would be sort of potentially.
Yeah, I would say, well, maybe using our recently analogous PD, part of, I think, some of the discussion for the unit mix for the affordable components where they landed on 2-bedroom units for the previous project we were talking about. I think in the same vein of trying to and 2-bedroom units in talking with a lot of the providers is like the sweet spot, in terms of like you can have a small family in those. I don't think you would worry. I wouldn't get into like the leasing arrangement, like where you're like getting into, well, you can't lease by the bedroom. I would just say, if the intent is to rent to families, set the affordable units have to be, a minimum of, or just set them at 2-bedroom units, and I think that's a pretty good chance you're going to get it.
I would like to add that to number 5.
Madam Chair, if I may make one remark, there is nothing in the PUD conditions or PD conditions that talks about student apartments. These are just referenced as multifamily units. I'm not sure where the student apartment concept came from, but it is not in our documents.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Lazari.
Madam Chair, I like kind of other clarifications on this condition before you guys vote, and more precise, condition 1. I think you guys are, or more condition 2, what they mean require streets with a project, so no development occurring in block no more than 2,000 feet. Again, there is no road, there is only one road in the project, All Archer Road. And as Mr. Swager mentioned, the perimeter of the 12 parcel is under 2,000 feet. So I don't know what that means, how you technically apply that to the project. Put a condition that is not applicable, it's just not a condition, or something that you cannot apply to a project. So again, it's something just to say that's the way the 2,000 feet, that doesn't make any sense for this project. So I just need a clarification of that. And again, condition number 3, the same way, we already offered to make all the frontage along Archer Road to meet the requirements on the transit zones, and there is no more streets in the project. So what that means, that condition in particular, Southwest 31st Terrace, they show in the exhibit, that's private, that's part of the parcels, that's not a road. We need to provide access to the parcels to the back, but there's no a road. So again, just put a condition that doesn't apply to this project, just make it confusing, or you cannot apply it. So I will love to hear from what that means, a little clarification of that.
Okay, I don't.
So I'm sharing the map.
Madam Chair, the illustration that's up there includes a perimeter that is not our property. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, so Mr. Hawkins, I don't know if you want to clarify.
yeah, the suggestion is that when the PD come back, the standards be that new streets be added. So Mr. Reyes' comment that there's not streets means that the current proposal wouldn't meet that standard. Put in streets.
There's no streets for them to connect to.
That's the whole, right, this whole conversation has been about, right, the conversation from you and from Mr. Blythe is, we're going to see new urban development in this area over time. If each incremental development builds a connecting street segment, I mean, this is how city streets get built over time. The subsequent developments build the streets, and then you've got a road that runs a long distance. So this project would include streets that would eventually be part of a block network. But now, you would just make sure there was enough streets so that all development was on a block that wasn't bigger than 2,000 feet.
I'm just having a hard time, like, with that parcel layout, picturing what that network would become.
So what this is showing here is that the entire perimeter of the property is 2,390 feet.
Hypothetically, one way you could do it is submit a subdivision plat. You don't have to do a plat. You could do meets and bounds, but build a road around the perimeter. And now you've got 2 blocks made with the private street in the center and with roads around the perimeter, and you build on those 2 blocks. And the frontage standard is the buildings would need to meet the Transit Code frontage standards where they front on those streets.
So there is a road that goes back to what used to be the Enclave Apartments. I mean, you can see it there, or Gainesville Place. There is like a road right there, sort of on the west side. So to run another road on that perimeter 100 feet away doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Alternative thing you could do if the property owner let you gain an easement would be a road on the south that connects to the Enclave Apartments access road. That would work too. But I don't think we should tell the applicant how to do it.
I need to point out that the perimeter that you're showing still includes a parcel that is not within our property. On the very westernmost property, that is not within our PUD PD.
Yeah, it's just for illustration purposes. It's not sort of the exact, I mean, we're basically what
I
I'm
think
showing
she's
is.
saying that one,
Oh.
because I think that was part of,
The small rectangle on the west side, that's the east side, on the west side.
the west side, the one that doesn't have a structure in it.
Stop right there.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
So these sides are really somewhere between 500 and 700 feet long on a side. Not 2,000 on the side.
Madam Chair, and again, Mr. Hawkins is putting a condition that we don't have control over. He wants us to connect to another property that we don't have control over. This is trying to put conditions when we don't have control over those properties. And I can tell you from my experience, because I work in several of these projects around this, the people don't want to connect the enclave. We try many times on another project. We have a proposal for a hotel in the west side of this property. Unfortunately, due to the pandemic, never got built. It got approved by the city. It never got built. But again, it's one of those conditions that sounds good. And just saying the condition, but practically you cannot apply it to a project that have a perimeter less than 2,000 square feet.
I respectfully disagree. And, you know.
Mr. Ackerman?
I hate redesigning a project from the dais.
And I'm not.
It just seems like a terrible, terrible idea. It rarely works. I was wondering if the applicant, having listened to our concerns, would be interested in a continuance to our next regular meeting and address some of the concerns that they've heard tonight. And that'll give everybody a chance to kind of think about this with a little bit more thoughtfulness.
Mr. Chair, I think we have heard your concerns, and the concerns are about the affordable housing, and we have a minimum of 24 units. That's fine. I think that's a condition that we can accept. But like Mr. Ackerman mentioned, you know, we trying to redesign the project. The board tried to redesign the project. That's something that we had to come back and look at and go to the, you know, design board and look at those conditions. We are, you know, in the land use portion of this, and it's kind of difficult to visualize put conditions in the land use when you are not even presenting the PD yet or the design of the project. But I would like to hear what is on the major concerns of the board. Again, if the major concern in affordable housing, you know, the 24 units, that's fine. I don't think that we have a major problem. And keep in mind also that, you know, the units that are there right now, they can go and redevelop those properties in higher density there and have zero affordable housing, you know, with the existing zoning and land use, and have, you know, other things. So I'm not saying that that's what the owner wanna do in this property, but they can go and without requesting any land use and rezoning and remove all those units altogether. So, but we definitely consider the affordable housing, and I don't know other item that is important for the board, the majority of the board, we definitely can consider.
Okay, Sophia?
Yeah, I was just gonna mention where I found student apartments. I knew I wasn't making that up. The Kimley Horn summary looks like they were hired to do a traffic study. They referenced student apartments several times in their executive summary about the projected potential development program. That's where I got the whole condominium units and student apartments. It looks like they actually separated by number what is projected to be put there. So I just wanted to mention that's where I found that, and that is on the zoning petition, not the land use change.
Madam Chair, if I may make a remark about that, we were asked by the mobility department to do the different calculations based on that because of the way the trip generation, sort of a worst case scenario, but there is nothing in the PD or PUD documents that specifies that those are student apartments. They are listed merely as multifamily units.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any lights on right now, but we sort of have a motion in progress.
With no second.
With no second.
Unless
so,
somebody wants to second it, we should probably.
Let's see the motion again.
So there's a motion to continue the item with the following, with the modified proposed conditions. So is there a second on this, or do we want to take another stab at a motion?
Actually, I would second that.
Okay, so Mr. Ackerman is seconding this. So the motion is to continue the land use with the following modified proposed conditions. Okay, can we do a roll call vote on this one again, Mr. Castillo?
Stephanie Sutton,
I'm recusing myself.
Christian Newman,
Yes.
Bob Ackerman,
Here, yes. I regret that I'm here. But yes.
James Blythe,
Yes.
Jason Hurst,
Abstain.
Sophia Corridero,
No.
Thomas Hawkins,
Yes.
so you got 4 in favor and 1 against.
Okay, great. So this passes. So we will see this item again probably next month. Staff will be in touch with the applicant to figure out the schedule. With that, I think we still need to read the next item into the record, but probably skip the presentations and just make a motion to do the same thing.
Right.
Okay, so can we read that into the record?
Petition PB-21-103ZON, EDA agent, rezone property from City of Gainesville mixed-use low-intensity to residential multifamily, RMF 8, to City of Gainesville planned development, generally located in the 3041-3155 block of Old Archer Road, related to PB-21-102 LUC.
Madam Chair, I move the Plan Board continue petition PB 21-103ZON until the same meeting at which we hear the related land use petition.
Okay, do we have a
Second.
second? Okay, all of those in favor of that, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, and the same 2 recusals, so it should be the same vote on that. Okay, with that, can we read the last item on the agenda into the record, please?
Petition PB-21-00088 SUP, Dunbar Hotel Gainesville LLC, request for a special use permit to allow a restaurant use at the subject property, zoned urban 4, U4, up to 20 units per acre, located at 732 Northwest 4th Street.
Have Nathaniel
Who's
Chan.
presenting this one?
Nathaniel Chan will be presenting this item.
Okay, welcome, Mr. Chan.
Thanks. I've been here the whole time. But yeah.
Welcome to the fun.
Yeah, no
It's your
problem. My turn. Good evening, City Plan Board. Let me share my screen really quick. It's actually really funny. I used to live a couple months ago in the Enclave Apartments right by the proposed development over there. So good to hear. But can you see my, oh, this is my notes. Sorry
Yeah, so we
about
see the presenter screen right now.
Can you see my screen?
There we go. Yep,
Awesome.
we're ready to go.
All right. Good evening, City Plan Board. Again, my name is Nathaniel Chan. I'm a planner with the City of Gainesville Department of Sustainable Development. This is petition PB-21-88 SUP, a special use permit to allow for restaurant use at the Dunbar Hotel. The property owner and representatives for the Dunbar Hotel are in the Zoom meeting tonight, I believe. The property owner might be in the chambers to answer questions. At least that's what I heard, but I'm not there, so I'm not sure. But anyway, The Dunbar Hotel is located at 732 Northwest 4th Street and was previously used as a single-family home and dormitory along with other historical uses. The current zoning is U4, Urban 4, and the current land use is mixed-use office/residential MOR. The property is approximately 0.14 acres, and restaurants are allowed in the U4 zoning district with a special use permit. The applicant is requesting a restaurant use of the subject property that will include 4 indoor seats and 15 outdoor seats. Here is the existing land use and zoning. So just to orient you a little bit, here is the subject property. To the north and west is Gainesville Police Department, GPD. To the south is actually a property that the owner of the Dunbar Hotel owns. It is a single family home. To the east are existing single family homes, and to the north and east, there's Northwest 8th Avenue and Northwest 4th Street, or formerly Grove Street. These are all U6 zoning. So the Dunbar Hotel is located within the Pleasant Street Historic District, and it is a contributing structure to the historic district. I'll speak about that in a little bit. Here is the preliminary site plan. The front door is down here, and the applicant is proposing 15 seats with tables outside in the backyard area on an existing concrete slab. There are 4 seats inside over here in the bar area. The hours of operation that are proposed are every day, Monday through Sunday, from 10 a.m. to 11 p.m., with no outdoor seating or dining after 10 p.m. And so there are no proposed structural changes to the existing building. There is currently no on-site parking proposed at the subject property. The applicant has entered into a joint use agreement for parking facilities, which is allowed per section 30-7.1 of the Land Development Code. The code requires restaurants to have 3 vehicle spaces plus 1 per 3 seats of seating capacity where service is provided, and based on this metric, 10 vehicle parking spaces are required. Through the joint use of parking facilities agreement, the applicant will be jointly using those 10 parking spaces at the lessor's property. On-street public parking is also available. So a little bit more about this. So here are the code sections that reference the location of the parking area and the joint use agreement. One thing to note here is that the applicant's current joint use agreement does not comply with the section. So section 30-7.1E, the location of the parking area, which states that the required off-street vehicle parking shall be located within 600 feet of the principal structure. I believe the one that's listed on their joint use agreement is actually about 700 feet away. So the applicant stated that there are other businesses within the 600 feet that would be able to meet this location requirement as far as the joint use agreement is concerned. And we as staff had discussed previously also that we were under the impression it would be listed different. So it just might be an address change that could happen. So as part of staff recommendation, we recommend that the applicant return to staff with a revised joint use agreement, and staff will review based on meeting the code requirements and move from there. So that's the area about the joint use of parking area and the joint use agreement. Staff reviewed the petition, and the petition meets the review criteria for a special use permit outlined in section 30-3.24 of the Land Development Code. The proposed restaurant use is consistent with the comprehensive plan and with surrounding land uses. Since there are no proposed structural changes to the existing building, development plan or site plan review is not needed at this time. The applicant will need to apply for an occupancy permit in order to establish their use, and more details on the petition meeting the review criteria can be found in the staff report. With that being said, staff recommends approval of petition PB-21-88 SCP with conditions. Here are the special use permit conditions. I won't read through all of them, but I will touch on what each of the conditions are referencing. So condition 1 is referencing compliance with the city's noise ordinance. Condition 2 is what I just mentioned with the occupancy permit, and they're required to apply for that. Condition 3 is in terms of their hours of operation. Condition 4 is regarding the joint use parking agreement, and as part of our recommendation, we recommend that they just return with a revised one with a different address and parcel number listed that is within 600 feet of the principal structure. And condition 5 is limiting the amount of seating to 15 outdoor seats and 4 indoor seats. With that, that's the end of my presentation, but one last thing. Staff received an email in response to this petition from neighbors across the street. The email expressed concerns regarding parking, noise, hours of operation, and events. The email was forwarded to you for your review. Thank you. I'm here to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chan. We have a couple of lights. I think, Mr. Ackerman, you were first.
My recollection is quite a few years ago, we had a petition somewhat like this for the Fat Tuscan. And one of the key concerns was music outside. And my assumption is that the city's noise ordinance will apply to this property during operating hours. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. The city's noise ordinance applies to this property and all others. And I would like to mention also that this property is abutting GPD on the north and west. So I'm not sure if that really factors in here, but they might have to abide by it a little bit more closely in terms of that.
Thank you, Mr. Chan. Sophia?
My question is about just acknowledging that this property is in a historic district and whether that the special use permit or getting the special use permit is going to be under any additional regulations or requirements because it's in a historic district. So when it comes to maybe the parking or the occupancy, the noise, whatever, so forth, I'm just curious if there's any overlap there.
Sure. So the historic district really is trying to preserve the historic character of the neighborhood, the Pleasant Street Historic District. And since the applicant isn't proposing any structural changes to the outside facade, they're not changing any of the windows or any of the historical aspects. Actually, the applicant and the property owner are sort of embracing the historic nature of the building. Previously, it had gone through a bunch of different uses. I mentioned dormitory, I mentioned, I believe it was sort of like a women's health agency at one point. So they're really embracing that sort of side of the historic nature, and that's sort of the appeal to the restaurant as well. As far as any conditions related to the historic district, there are none. If they were to come back and want to do any exterior renovations or any updates to the facade or changing the historic structure, they would likely have to go to the Historic Preservation Board to complete a certificate of appropriateness or a COA. Does that answer your question?
Mr. Hawkins.
A couple of comments on the parking. The Hatchetbury is very close. It's just a 2-block walk from this location. I don't know about the number of feet, but it's a very short walk. It's along 8th Avenue, which is a bad street for walking, to be honest. But it does have sidewalks. And the MPO recently updated the long-range transportation plan to identify 8th Avenue for improvements. So it's in the pipeline for the MPO to make 8th Avenue a better place for people to move along. I think they specifically talked about adding bike lanes and widening the sidewalks as part of those improvements. So I think I really love this solution. I hate to think that we require people to have parking in order to serve food, especially in a mixed-use neighborhood like this. One of the great tragedies of the pandemic is the loss of the breakfast place in Pleasant Street on Northwest 5th Avenue that was just a phenomenal restaurant, had 0 parking, caused parking conflicts, but you know what? That's part of living in a mixed-use neighborhood. So I think I'm in favor of the special use permit, and I'm glad that that solution exists. I would add, if we get around to making a motion to approve this, I don't know if we will or not, but I do think we should suggest to the city commission to honor the concerns of parking from the neighbors, that the city look at a neighborhood parking zone, which is the kind of protection it has closer to campus for this neighborhood. Not that it adopt one, but at least that it refer it to Department of Mobility to kind of figure out if it's appropriate. And that if we get there, I'd make that as a separate motion.
Okay. Any other questions or comments from the board or staff? Does the applicant have a presentation? Do we know? Is someone here or someone?
Yeah,
Okay,
they just
great.
joined the Zoom call, but there is no presentation, I don't
Okay.
believe. But
Yes, the applicant is here.
Okay, we have someone here. So if you would just introduce yourself and.
My name is Maud Wilson, and again, thank you so much for all of your hard work on this. I do want to point out that the Hatchetberry is who we have an agreement with. It's not the one that's with our application. It is within the 300 feet, and so that's what we'll go ahead and do the formal notarized with them. So that does take care of that parking issue. We're excited about this property. It's mixed use. I moved my family in there last year. We've been there for a year working on it. It's got so much history and wonderful things that are going to be fantastic to showcase. I did want to mention the parking, but I felt like there was something else I wanted to mention. But if you have any other questions, I'd be happy to answer any of those.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions from the board for the applicant? Sophia, go ahead.
So mine is about like signage and communication. How will people know that they should be parking there? Are there signs currently in the neighborhood saying only residents can park there?
Our plan will be a couple of things. We have parking signs that we will be putting up once we're established that indicate where they should park. Also, we're going to have signs on the door. You know, this kind of thing that you'd see if you went to a place that said, hey, don't park in our neighbor's lawn. You know, they'll tell you, or something along those lines. So that way when people see right away. Right now, honestly, most people, without asking, are parking in the police parking lot, which is right next door. It's empty after 5. We don't encourage that, but that's where they're parking, and it just hasn't come up. It is an urban, neighborhood, so obviously parking is a concern, and I haven't been there through a football season, so I don't know if it gets bad. But at the moment, there's a lot of free spaces on that road. So.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Newman?
What kind of restaurant is it going to be?
So I also own Downtown Wine and Cheese. And so we're rebranding that into changing the name and everything, but almost exactly the same footprint. Cheese and charcuterie boards, small plates, pizzas, things like that. So no deep fryer, the restaurant is almost exactly the same as what was downtown. So no grease traps or anything like that, just small plates and cheese and charcuterie.
Sounds good.
Great. I'm not seeing any other lights. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
I would make one
Mr.
comment.
Ackerman, one more thing.
I had the pleasure of touring the Dunbar several years ago. Senator Perry still owned it, and on behalf of Grace Marketplace, we considered using it for some of our affordable housing tenants. And I was surprised at how good the condition was, and it's got really a nice space in the back, and it is an urban space, and people are used to finding their way there however they do. And I can imagine,
and it is right along that bike trail.
Yeah, and I can imagine lots of people just walking. So good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you. With that, I don't see any other lights right now, so we'll go to other public comment. If there's any members from the public that wish to speak to this item, please step up, just introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Melanie Barr, and I should know this, but I wondered, is there any space on the site for parking, or is everything off-site?
Sure.
So what Mr. Ackerman had mentioned, the reason the condition is so good in this particular building is that in 1999, the city and Pleasant Place collaborated to renovate the building. And that's why everything is only 20 years old, even though the building is 1936 originally. One of the decisions that they made at that time was to brick sidewalk over top of the existing parking lot and put a picket fence in front. So there had been 20 years ago parking on site, but at this point it's grass and sidewalk and not a parking lot or a parking driveway anymore. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, great, thank you. Other members of the public that wish to speak to this item?
Hi, my name is July Thomas. I just wanted to start by saying that I really appreciate the work that you've been doing. I've been following your renovation. It's beautiful, and I'm really happy that building is in your hands. The only thing that I wanted to talk about was the parking, specifically in that neighborhood. I've spoken to a few neighbors who've already had some concerns with some of the pop-up events and stuff with that street parking. So the Hatchetberry idea is a brilliant one. I just don't know how many people are going to park there and walk the 2 blocks, the 750 feet along 8th Avenue when there is street parking. So there are a few old historic houses that do not have parking at the house that rely on the street parking right in front of the Dunbar Hotel. But additionally, if you go down the street, there's a cross street of 7th Ave. There's no street parking on 7th Ave. And then the next available street parking is just south of that, also along 4th Street. And there are more houses there that don't have parking for the houses. So here's the issue. If you have people parking in GPD, that's great for people who are visiting. The issue is if that street parking gets filled up, now you have an elderly person who's coming home and it becomes an accessibility issue where they can't get to their home. And where are they supposed to park? Are they going to park in GPD and get towed the next morning? Are they going to park at the Hatchetberry? Where are they supposed to go? So I'd just like to encourage this conversation to take the form of making sure that the community is looked after and that we don't end up in a situation where we need to now come in and put in meters or get parking passes and go through all of that rigmarole for the street parking. That's basically the jux of my comment. I appreciate it. Have a good night.
Thank you. Anyone else that would like to speak to this item? Step right up.
Hey everybody. So earlier I said my name was James Brown. I didn't mention that I was an employee of MAUD at Downtown Wine and Cheese for over a year. I started working for MAUD in 2018 when I was furloughed as a federal employee. And I just wanted to speak to a little bit of how MAUD runs a business and how she actually appreciates and really pays attention to the community around her. When I was an employee at Downtown Wine and Cheese, at the time I was getting out of a very difficult relationship, and I was dropped into Duck Pond, which is adjacent to Downtown Wine and Cheese. I didn't know the area, I didn't know anybody there, I had a really hard time fitting in. I went to MAUD looking for a job, and after I got a job there, I was introduced to the people in the neighborhood. I was introduced to how to run a business in a urban community, and I have always looked up to and admired MAUD, not just because she's a successful businesswoman, but because she actually does take the time to do things like talk to the community around her and find out exactly what it is that's bothering them or what she can do better. I think that the community, Pleasant Street, would definitely benefit from having a business owner like MAUD as their neighbor, and I absolutely understand the other community members' suggestion about parking. I know it's an issue for some people, and I am more than sure that MAUD will make sure that those issues are rectified in a way that makes as many people happy as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public that would like to speak to this item? Okay, not seeing any, we'll bring it back to the board for a motion or a discussion.
I move the City Plan Board approve petition PB-21-00088 SUP with staff recommended conditions.
Second.
Okay, Mr. Hurst, were you or who was that? Who was
I think that
second?
was
Somebody
Christian.
beat Bob. Was it Christian? Okay.
Well, I did.
It was
it
Christian.
you?
This is birthday.
I don't care. I'm just trying to go home.
This is your first tough decision here, Mr. Castillo. You can pick who the second was, Mr. Hurst or Mr. Ackerman. Okay, great. All of those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, and Mr. Hawkins, I think you wanted to make another motion.
I move that the plan board request of the city commission, perhaps planning staff can pass this on to the commission at the appropriate time, or the city manager, but request that the city commission consider a neighborhood parking zone for the Pleasant Street neighborhood. And with our request, please provide information about this particular petition so they know the context.
Okay, do we have a second for that?
I would second that,
Okay.
just to be helpful.
All of,
Whoever said.
yeah, you can give that one to the other person. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Okay. That passes. Thank you all for joining us tonight. Are there any information items? I know there weren't any listed, Mr. Persons.
I did want to use this opportunity, assuming he hasn't fallen asleep, to introduce you to our recent hire, our new planner for Forrest Edelton. Forrest, are you still on the line?
Reintroduce us.
Reintroduce you.
Forrest, would you like to introduce yourself? Are you still on
No,
the Zoom?
no, no. I think he must have. Yeah, he was on earlier.
Okay, I did see his
I did
name
see
up
him
there.
earlier.
Yeah. Okay, we'll pull him in next month.
Sounds good. The other, I just wanted to say we're going to be reaching out to try to find some times for the subsequent workshops on some of the other comp plan chapters too. So look for email.
Yeah, we are, and I did, I think I sent out an initial just kind of feeler email for the week of 9/13, so that's still the week that we're looking at. It most likely, based on the availability of broadcast and others involved, it most likely would be the Wednesday of that week, so the 15th. Does anybody have any objections to that?
Will it be virtual?
It will be virtual, because it'll be a workshop, so you are permitted to do virtual workshops when there's no voting on items. So what do we think about that?
Yeah, I just have to take a look at it because my husband teaches.
And you don't have to
on
tell me
Wednesday
now,
nights.
but,
Yeah, so I've just got to figure out childcare.
okay, and if not, if
I'm a
it doesn't
baby.
work, we can look for a different day, possibly on a different week.
So maybe just send that day
Okay.
out
Yeah.
to everybody via email.
Sure.
When we have our calendars in front of us.
Yeah.
And it's not, 10 o'clock at night. And we just
Yeah.
confirm. Mr. Hawkins,
I was just gonna ask, did we move the meeting in September? Not the workshop, but the regular meeting?
Yes, so the city commission scheduled a special meeting over our plan board meeting in September. So it's still gonna be in the same week.
that also moved to a Wednesday.
Yes, so it was scheduled for September 23rd. The auditorium and broadcast is no longer available because the city commission will be having a meeting, so we have, we've rescheduled it for the 22nd with the hopes that that will still work for everybody.
Could I suggest something? The DRB frequently has nothing planned on their day, or they only have one item. Maybe we could kick them out of there.
Or double up, we could, go right after them.
Yeah, because, they're almost inert.
On that question, I wanted to ask, room 16 is not huge, and if we all get in there with staff and members of the public,
and breathe.
Yeah, what's COVID protocol in that room? It's tiny.
Did I hear that commission meetings are going to be virtual again, or is that not?
I have no idea, I don't think so.
They did, the city did renovate room 16 and blew out the back wall, so it is a lot.
Is it got
It's like
Arctic
twice the space
winds
it
in
used to
there,
be.
you know?
Yeah,
And ages.
it is. Yeah, it is like it's I mean, basically, if you remember the old room 16,
Yeah.
that back wall is no longer there, so it's sort of this long cavernous room now.
Oh, it's with the meeting room adjacent.
Yep, yep.
Yeah, so we did have to schedule it for that time because there's actually a meeting in here that Wednesday night, but it's not being broadcast, so we can still do it in room 16. There's a lot of logistics that go into rescheduling the meeting, so.
Okay, I'll check with you offline.
Okay.
Yeah. I can just say, like, I know 2 Wednesdays in a row is gonna be difficult for me because I have childcare issues on Wednesdays. So I can potentially do one and not the other.
Okay, so
I
maybe
need to take a look at it, but 2 Wednesdays in a row is gonna be tough for me, childcare wise.
So maybe we look at rescheduling the workshop because I think we'll have items that are being
Yeah,
noticed.
yeah, I'll just bring them with me and they won't cause any disruption at all.
Okay, yeah, we can definitely coordinate on this. I want to work with everyone's schedule, so happy to do that.
Are we gonna quit?
Yeah, so if there's no member comment, and right now our next meeting is scheduled for September 22nd, but we will get an update on that via email. I don't know if this is possible for you all, like, you know, it may fly in the face of like sunshine law or something, but like, could we use something like a scheduling app where you like click through and like everybody can just kind of click their days, because then you can see it all in one place. Everybody's just replying to emails now. Like if we could use like a doodle, or I mean, there's dozens of those websites. Like that would, I think, maybe help with this effort.
Yeah, we can definitely, I don't see why that would be
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be a lot
It
more
might be
effective.
easier than the
Hey,
email,
Jason,
like
are
have
there
everybody
actually
pick their
outdoors in that?
days.
Yeah.
How about that?
Okay.
And so also on the front end.
Oh, that's fine, but
I
most,
usually try to check,
mostly
well, I check
everybody
with
has
you all
other
first, but then
things
I want to
on.
check with
Yeah,
the availability of the auditorium and broadcasting stuff as well.
that's where I carry my cocaine, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of the websites that do that, but it's pretty easy to set it up and just email it out.
Yeah, that sounds like a great idea.
As long as it's not breaking any rules. I caught the first part of that ethics workshop, but not all of it, a couple weeks ago, so.
Can only accept up to $100.
Yes, yes. Okay, with that, we will adjourn.
You're the one.